Chapter 1557. If my guess is correct, the real supreme and infinite origin immortal art should be hidden there. The origin immortal art. It's the origin immortal art. Hurry and charge over. Ha ha ha, the origin immortal art is mine now. Anyone who makes an enemy of me will die. Get out of my way. The world's #1 art is mine. Wang Chong was far from the only one who understood this point. As the origin immortal palace descended from the sky and landed on the altar, some of the martial artists immediately used movement techniques to rush toward the origin immortal palace, shrouded in golden light, not even bothering with the men in black behind them. Whoosh, whoosh. The stone bridge and the iron chains flew past as these martial artists charged over in a frenzy. But a moment later, when these people touched the golden light on the outermost edge of the origin immortal palace, rumble! The golden light blazed as if some sort of seal had been triggered, and a dreadful and unstoppable energy surged forward. The fact that these martial artists had been able to last this long meant that each one of them was a powerful expert. But when struck by the golden light, they were sent flying like ragdolls. And behind them was Wan, Zhang, Deep, Yuan. The shrill screams grew further and further away, and in just a few moments, all the cultivators had disappeared. Fools! At the sight of this, the leader of the group, the man with the golden-red tiger mask, laughed coldly. He looked at the disappearing cultivators, as if they were idiots. They had planned this operation for a very, very long time. If not for the seal around the origin immortal palace making it difficult to charge in, they would never have left such an opening for these martial artists to get ahead of them. Everyone hear my order. Kill them. Kill them all. The tiger-masked man's eyes were cold and callous. With a wave of his sleeve, he gave the order to kill the martial artists. Kill. Without any hesitation. In the next moment, all the black-clad experts in front of the tunnel entrance surged with killing chi. They brandished their sabers and swords and charged at the vast crowd of cultivators. Although the opposing side seemed to have the most number of martial artists, these black-clothed experts roared angrily, giving people the feeling that they had the absolute advantage. Roar! Bestial howls rang out as the black-clothed men began to transform into half-luwu and half-luwu creatures, or black flame azuras exuding powerful auras. With lightning-fast speed, they charged at the martial artists. A massacre had begun. Kill. Be careful, fight it out with them. On the other side, with a cliff behind them, the martial artists quickly engaged in a chaotic battle with this group, their eyes bloodshot. Saber and sword clashed, and stellar energy clashed. The scene became extremely chaotic. Pu-pu-pu. The half-luwu and black flame azuras were like tigers in a flock of sheep, charging and slaughtering the martial artists, throwing them into disarray. The storm-like attacks came from all directions, but they were completely blocked by these mutated black-clothed men, with their tyrannical bodies and terrifying strength. They didn't even use any weapons. They only used their 10 fingers to pierce through the martial artists' astral energy. Their round fingers pierced through the martial artists' bodies, leaving bloody holes in them. The martial artists trembled and immediately dropped to the ground. Some of the experts from the other sects were powerful, but when they were entangled by the black flames, their stellar energy began to burn, and they couldn't help but let out shrill and terrified howls. The harvest has only just begun. At almost the same time, a bamboo hat man suddenly stepped forward, the corner of his lips peeking out from the edge of his bamboo hat slightly curling into a cruel and callous smile. Clang! As the battle raged on, the bamboo hat man unsheathed the saber at his waist, accompanied by a saber energy that crackled like lightning. Bang! The air exploded, and the bamboo hat man's body swayed as he vanished into the void. Greater void step. The bamboo hat man moved like a bolt of lightning, his body flickering about the battlefield so fast that not even the naked eye could keep up with him. All one could see was faint white ripples spreading and transforming in the air. Ping pim 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 pim. Behind him, the other 2 bamboo hat men, including the bamboo hat leader, also began to attack. In order to settle this once and for all, the dear immortal had summoned the other great immortals. 3 great immortals attacking at the same time was an extremely rare sight in the organization. Even the three bamboo hat men were very careful, not daring to show the slightest bit of carelessness. 1, 2, 3. At this moment, almost all the men in black had moved out, and screams filled the air. As the two sides clashed, one martial artist after another was forced to retreat, suffering grievous casualties. Assume formation. At this moment, Zhengqi League Lord Song Yuanyi's eyes flashed as he gave the order. His voice was steady and heavy, extremely calm. In the midst of this chaos, he exuded a sense of calm and confidence. In a flash, the surrounding martial artists subconsciously began to approach the Righteous Alliance group. Buzz! With Song Yuanyi's order, the experts of the Zhengqi League began to vibrate with stellar energy. In small groups of 3, they began to form small formations, and then 5 small formations joined together to form a larger formation. All of the formations were connected to one another. Their auras merged into one, as if they were a single person. In the blink of an eye, the black-clothed men advanced, their experts charging toward Song Yuanyi's group. A half. Lu Wuxia in black screamed, his hair disheveled and his expression savage. Like a beast choosing its prey, he lunged at Song Yuanyi. Alliance Lord, watch out! Cries of alarm could be heard. These half. Lu Wuxia in black had such powerful bodies that they could even block stellar energy. Who knew how many martial artists they had just killed? But in the face of all this, Song Yuanyi remained calm, not a hint of panic in his eyes. Bang! As the half. Lu Wuxia in black charged forward, a deep green light flickered on his body. Boom! Song Yuanyi didn't move at all, but when the beast-like half, Lu Wuxia in black was still 3 feet away from Song Yuanyi, it suddenly crashed into an invisible barrier. Dizzy, it came to a sudden stop. Boom! Song Yuanyi held his hands behind his back and remained motionless, only his robe fluttering. A moment later, a stream of green stellar energy flowed through the pores of the half. Lu Wuxuang man in black and into his body. Cackalack. Countless leaves and vines sprouted out of the pores of the half. Lu Wuxia in black, and even some brightly colored flowers began to sprout from them. Their exposed skin also quickly changed from a copper iron black to a tree-like green. How could this be? The half. Lu Wuxia slowly raised his head, his eyes brimming with disbelief as he stared at the indifferent Song Yuanyi. Cackalack. A few moments later, this powerful and invincible half. Lu Wuxia in black immediately turned into a tree that stood motionless in front of Song Yuanyi. Their life energy had completely vanished. The half Lu Wuxia. By sacrificing a great deal of stellar energy and latent potential, they were able to greatly increase the strength of their bodies and move faster and faster, like a monster. Alas, this simple strengthening of the body was actually much easier for Song Yuanyi, who was skilled in the spring art. Bastard! The bamboo hat man's expression chilled at this sight, and he transformed into a black whirlwind that lunged at the Righteous Alliance members behind Song Yuanyi and Song Yuanhei with incredible speed. Great sundering art! A calm and unhurried voice came from the side. Before Song Yuanyi could act, the Vice Alliance Lord of the Zhengqi League, Xie Guangting, stepped forward and punched. This punch seemed slow but was fast, and before the man in black could get close, Xie Guangting had already taken the initiative to attack. Broom! The earth quaked and stellar energy boomed. Endless white light more dazzling than the sun exploded from Xie Guangting's fist. In that instant, the space trembled, and in front of Xie Guangting's grand sundering art, countless cracks immediately appeared like glass. At the same time, the bamboo hat man's dreadful stellar energy was also torn apart. Chapter 1558. The eternal spring qi quickly raised their spirits to the peak, and at the same time, healed their internal injuries one by one. Boom boom boom. In just a few seconds, the Zhengqi League experts in the formation began to engage in fierce battle with the men in black. Above their heads, there was a flash of light, and with a heaven-shaking explosion, stellar energy exploded in the midst of the men in black. Miserable screams rang out, as the 8 black-clothed experts were killed by Song Yuanyi's eternal spring mantra, before they could even make a sound. Seeking death. At almost the same time, Xie Guangting's eyes flashed with cold light as he attacked. Putting aside Song Yuanyi and Xie Guangting, on the left side of the passage, The members of the five-group alliance were also enduring the frenzied attacks of the men in black. However, unlike the Jingqi League, the five-group alliance did not have such complicated formations or tactics. They only had one method of fighting: to fight with all their strength, and to fight to the death. Awa! With a heaven-shaking bestial roar, a massive black dragon lunged forward, its long tail fiercely lashing out. With a single strike, 10 some men in black were sent flying like ragdolls. Boom! Those dragon claws heavily stomped down, and a black-robed man's face was filled with terror. He didn't even have time to dodge, and his protective stellar energy was scattered by the pitch-black dragon claws, and he was smashed into a pile of meat paste. If you want to kill this old man, I'd like to see just what skill you have. The Black Een ancestor's cold and sinister voice resounded over the battlefield. Behind them was a cliff, and the members of the five-group alliance had already been forced into desperate straits. Cornered beasts would still struggle, and the Black Een ancestor had a titan of the evil path with him. At almost the same moment that the Black Een ancestor launched his attack, the earth quaked as another enormous storm of energy appeared in everyone's perception. Roar! Right behind the black dragon, a huge bone demon appeared. It was 30 to 40 meters tall, and black smoke surged from its body. It looked incomparably malevolent, and it appeared before everyone's eyes. Wrath of the Bone Devil. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, countless dried bones were uprooted from the ground and gathered in the giant bone demon's right arm, turning into a thick bone fist made up of thousands of white bones. Then it fiercely smashed towards the ground. Rumble, the bone fist descended, causing the earth to shake and the ground to cave in. Even the place where everyone was standing seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The Bone Devil ancestors' attacks caused the men in black to scream. Even the Half, Lu Wus, and the Black Flame Azuras were unable to take a single blow before being blown apart by the Bone Devil ancestors' massive fists. An intense aura of death surged into the bodies of these black-robed men. It actually turned them into skeletons, and they fell to the ground. Bastard! Powerful experts no weaker than the three bamboo hat men charged toward the Bone Devil ancestors group with savage expressions. The battle was intense, the sounds of fighting and clashing stellar energy ringing out incessantly. In a few short moments, the air was filled with a bloody mist, and the ground was covered in corpses. Even though they had Song Yuani, Xie Guangting, the Black Een ancestor, the Bone Devil ancestor, the Myriad Ghost ancestor, the elders of the righteous and evil paths, and many unaffiliated martial artists, the overall strength of the men in black was far from what these martial artists could compare to. Their martial arts were fierce and tyrannical, blazing like wildfire. Moreover, their martial arts were completely different from the martial arts of the martial arts world. To the experts of the martial arts world, who were accustomed to the difference between the righteous and evil paths, these strange and powerful martial arts were impossible to defend against. It's our turn. Clang. As the battle reached its most intense, Wang Chong took 2 steps forward and raised the Origin Immortal Sword. Enormous waves of energy surged out of it. This divine sword was far stronger than Wang Chong had imagined, and after his battle with Bagushidu, Wang Chong was getting more and more proficient in using the Origin Immortal Sword, and he was gradually beginning to understand how to use it. These men in black are truly like maggots in one's bones. They're everywhere, but it's about time for us to counterattack. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with an extremely sharp light as he gazed at the densely packed men in black advancing on them. When one could no longer endure, there was no need to endure. Now that he had recovered all his energy, his illness had been cured, and he had the divine sword in his hand. He had nothing to worry about. Master, this is for you. I got it from the sacrificial altar. Leave the rest to me. Wang Chong tossed over the bottle he had obtained from the sacrificial altar, and then, dragging the Origin Immortal Sword behind him, he charged forward like a god of war, unstoppable and unstoppable. Pung! At the same time he stepped out, the earth trembled, and a powerful aura swept out from his body like a storm. Bang! Wang Chong's eyes flashed with cold light, and he transformed into a twisting bolt of lightning that vanished. Bum bum bum. 100 feet away, a violet streak barely visible to the naked eye flashed through the air. A moment later, there was a series of explosions as Wang Chong's origin immortal sword drew a long arc through the air. Wherever this arc passed, the men in black were blown to pieces by destructive energy. In just a few short moments, the men in black had lost 10 some experts. And this was only the beginning. Without the slightest warning, the black-clothed men who had been slaughtering the martial artists and fighting with the righteous and evil paths suddenly let out panicked screams, their bodies trembling as if they had lost control of themselves. And what was most uncontrollable was the stellar energy in their bodies. Boom! Like a river flowing into the ocean, the stellar energy in the bodies of the black flame Azuras began to uncontrollably surge out of their bodies, transforming into a sea of smoke that surged into Wang Chong's body. Thud thud thud. In the blink of an eye, the bodies of the men in black withered and collapsed to the ground. Their cultivations were all poured into Wang Chong's body. The great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art. This was the #1 art of the evil path. And now that Wang Chong had recovered his energy, it was even more powerful than before. Rumble! A fierce wind erupted from Wang Chong, and a powerful attractive force erupted from him. By relying on the enormous power of the origin immortal sword, Wang Chong's great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art had reached the subtle realm, and its power had increased by more than one level. Thud thud thud. The men in black screamed, their bodies seething with black smoke as they collapsed to the ground, trembling. Bastard! On the other side, the third bamboo hat man, who had been using the greater void step to wander around like a ghost, suddenly turned his head, his eyes cold. Hey, it's you. You actually dared to come knocking on my door. An extremely sinister and sharp light flashed through the third bamboo hat man's eyes. He had noticed Wang Chong when he first arrived at the core, but with the 3 great immortals present, the third bamboo hat man did not dare to act rashly. But now it was a different matter. In this place, even if Wang Chong grew wings, he would not be able to escape. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Clang! There was a shrill metallic whistle as the third bamboo hat man vanished into the void. Crack! In the depths of the void, a slender whip, as sharp as a blade, left a dreadful scar in the air as it lashed at the motionless Wang Chong. The black metal whip in the man's hand possessed a powerful stellar energy piercing ability that could easily tear apart a martial artist's stellar energy, even tearing them in two. Humph! At this sight, Wang Chong suddenly smiled. This was not his first time encountering this man in black. He had been the one to fight him in the underground river. But at that time, Wang Chong's strength had been greatly reduced, and he was in danger of cultivation defect. So he had been forced to avoid him. Now even Bagushidu had died to him, let alone the bamboo hat man. Perfect timing. Wang Chong's lips slowly curled into a smile, and then his body flickered. Before the bamboo hat man could arrive, Wang Chong had already taken the initiative to attack. Bang! In a flash of light, Wang Chong's body vanished into the void. Far behind him, rumble! An enormous wave of psychic energy, as heavy as a mountain, struck the invisible third bamboo hat man in the air. The greater void step was far faster than the one Wang Chong had obtained from the man in black. In terms of pure speed, Wang Chong was simply no match for the third bamboo hat man. Alas! Wang Chong didn't need to go through so much trouble to deal with the third bamboo hat man. His tangible psychic energy far surpassed that of a subtle realm expert. The third bamboo hat man's greater void step was completely useless against him. In an instant, there was an explosion in the depths of the void, followed by a series of screams that caught everyone off guard. Before the third bamboo hat man could reach him, a hair-thin bolt of violet lightning flashed through the air, imbued with destructive energy, as it struck the third bamboo hat man with lightning-fast speed. Bang! Before anyone could react, the third black-clothed bamboo hat man let out a blood-curdling scream, and was immediately sent flying like a kite with its string cut. With a bang, he smashed into the wall of the cave that was more than 10 meters high behind the battlefield. In an instant, smoke and dust billowed, gravel flew in all directions, and large chunks of rocks collapsed. The third bamboo hat man had been smashed into the wall by the terrifying power of Wang Chong's sword. Bastard! At the same time, the 30-meter-tall yellow scarf warrior suddenly turned around. As he turned, countless rocks began to fall, all of them stellar energy that had been petrified by his technique. Chapter 1559. The difference in strength between them and the bamboo hat leader was far too great. Even so, after they died, an invisible force continued to expand within their bodies. Their skin, hair, nails, and even the blood flowing out of their bodies slowly turned to stone. Kid, you truly have a tough life. The bamboo hat leader's resounding voice was like that of a god, echoing over the heavens. Since that's the case, I might as well kill you and put an end to any future troubles. Rumble. The earth quaked as the bamboo hat leader's massive body contained boundless energy. His every movement caused the entire cliff to tremble, as if it could not endure his immense strength. However, even though his body was huge, his movements were extremely nimble, and he was extremely fast. Rumble. Without the slightest hesitation, the yellow scarf warrior lunged at Wang Chong with a speed and agility that was completely different from its massive body. His massive fist exploded with golden light, shrouded in destructive torrents as it smashed toward Wang Chong. Rumble. The yellow scarf warrior's fist was fast, but Wang Chong's attack was even faster. In the face of this dreadful attack that could even petrify a martial artist along with their stellar energy, Wang Chong showed no intention of backing down. Now that he had fully recovered his strength, he was even stronger than before. Even in the face of this expert who could fight evenly with Song Yuanyi, Wang Chong was still able to display his sharpness and refused to pass on this responsibility. Art of God and Demon Obliteration. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong immediately used the supreme offensive sword art of the Central Plains. BZZ. Space shuddered, and then an enormous sword intent surged out of Wang Chong's body like a tsunami. This milky white light filled the world, instantly transforming into a vast beam of sword chi several dozen zhang long that slammed into the mountainous yellow scarf warrior. Boom! Two terrifying energies that surpassed the peak great general level clashed in the air like bolts of lightning. Kacha! A deafening sound rang out, and the entire sky seemed to be torn apart in that instant. An endless gale swept down from the sky like a huge wave, sweeping through the surroundings. Some of the black-clothed men and martial artists didn't even have time to react before they were swept away. However, the result of this seemingly evenly matched battle was completely different from what everyone had imagined. Boom! In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, there was a flash of white light, and the majestic milky white sword chi tore through the surging stellar energy around the yellow-scarved strongman's body that was 7 to 8 meters thick and as hard as armor. The magnificent sword chi advanced by leaps and bounds and struck the yellow-scarf strongman's thick rock arm. With a miserable scream and a shocking explosion, the yellow-scarfed strongman's huge body staggered back. His stone face was filled with horror. Impossible! At this moment, the yellow scarf warrior seemed to have been given a terrible fright. Crash! Just as he was retreating, the huge arm he had thrown out cracked and fell off piece by piece. And this was far from the end. Cacklack! Even the yellow scarf warrior's body began to crack and fall to the ground. Moreover, through the cracks between the rocks, one could clearly see strands of milky white sword chi that were like strands of hair moving about within his body like spirit snakes. Even after the battle was over, the terrifying sword chi and sword intent of the art of God and demon obliteration were still roaming through his body, continuing to wreak havoc. Not only that, the sword chi that Wang Chong had left in his body had caused the bamboo hat leader to completely lose control of the yellow scarf warrior's body for the first time. The destructive power of this sword Dao was far more terrifying than he had imagined. Boom! The yellow scarf warrior's massive body was pushed back step by step, and then it crashed into the wall behind it, stirring up a cloud of dust. What? For a moment all was silent. The bamboo hat men were stunned by this sight and turned their heads, incredulous looks on their faces. The bamboo hat leader's yellow scarf warrior was a top-class technique of their organization, and when used, it possessed boundless strength. The fact that it could petrify a martial artist's stellar energy was proof enough. Other than great immortals, no one else could surpass it. But not even if they were beaten to death could they have imagined that the child of destruction they had been pursuing would possess such terrifying strength. With a single strike, he had destroyed the yellow scarf warrior. Impossible! How could he be so strong? The second bamboo hat man found it difficult to conceal his shock. Of all the people here, he was probably the only one who had not fought with Wang Chong. But the three bamboo hat men were far from the only ones to be deeply shocked. It's him. It's that fake young Master Qingyang. No, it's that disciple of the demonic emperor. He's also here. The moment Wang Chong saw him, the members of the Jingqi League immediately recognized him. Wang Chong had once used the name of young Master Qingyang and lived with them in the base of the Jingqi League for some time. So many of them were very familiar with him. How could this be? At almost the same time, Song Yuanyi and Xie Guangting also noticed Wang Chong. These two alliance lords had weathered many storms and were composed individuals who would not easily lose their composure, even if Mount Tai were to collapse. But as they watched Wang Chong slowly descend from the sky like a flood dragon, the two of them were slightly taken aback. Song Yuanyi, Xie Guangting, and the members of the Jingqi League were all well aware of the strength of these three men in black, especially the yellow scarf warrior. When Song Yuanyi had fought with him, he had also been at an extreme disadvantage. If not for the fact that the Eternal Spring Mantra was adept at defense and possessed incredible endurance, as well as the astonishing rebound force, he would have already been defeated by the yellow scarf warrior. This kid, when did he get so strong? In the roiling fog, the Black Yin ancestor and the others also noticed what was going on over there. The Black Yin ancestor's battle was extremely strenuous, and he was facing off against several experts no weaker than the three bamboo hat men. Moreover, there were also many Lu Wus and Black Flame Azuras attacking him. These men in black were simply too powerful. Their techniques and fighting style were completely different from those of the martial arts sects, and they had an endless number of top-class experts. Both the members of the Five Ancestor Alliance and the Jingqi League were bitterly struggling to hold on. Thus, when Wang Chong defeated the third bamboo hat man with a single blow, and then defeated the even stronger yellow scarf warrior with a single blow, the yellow scarf warrior became the envy of all. The overwhelming strength displayed by the god of war, as well as the ease with which he fought, instantly became a clear stream that everyone envied in this precarious battlefield. At this moment, the only person who remained unperturbed was Wang Chong. The art of god and demon obliteration. This supreme technique was passed down from the Tang dynasty's war god So Yongsan. It was a supreme sword Dao that allowed one person to defend a city and deal with thousands of foreign invaders. It was unimaginably difficult to cultivate, and one would need several decades to reach major success. Ever since Wang Chong had obtained it, he had only been able to reach minor success in it. In ordinary realms like the true martial realm, or the profound martial realm, minor success in the destruction sword Dao was more than enough. But at the peak of the saint martial realm, or even the half-step subtle realm, minor success in the destruction sword Dao was far from enough. In normal circumstances, Wang Chong would need several decades to cultivate this technique. But the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, the mysterious Origin Immortal Sword, and a small portion of the Origin Immortal art allowed Wang Chong to convert his stellar energy into god and demon obliteration stellar energy. This allowed Wang Chong to bypass the extremely difficult cultivation of the god and demon obliteration sword, allowing him to reach major success in the destruction sword Dao for the first time. Each of the 10 supreme techniques of the Central Plains had their own areas of expertise. Although the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art was powerful, it was only in terms of increasing one's internal energy or targeting one's stellar energy. In terms of true offensive power, only the art of god and demon obliteration could allow Wang Chong to fully display his stellar energy. If that's the case, Wang Chong calmly landed on the ground, his body surging with energy. As he scanned the place where the yellow scarf warrior had fallen, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He was still not very familiar with the art of god and demon obliteration. Because the time was too short, he could not completely grasp this unparalleled sword technique. But as time passed, he became more and more familiar with the art of god and demon obliteration, and was gradually able to bring out the power of this unparalleled technique. Thorn has appeared. It seems to be the child of destruction. Right at this moment, a cold glint flashed through the masked man's eyes, and he suddenly spoke. They had almost complete control over the entire battlefield, suppressing both Song Yuanyi and the Black Yin ancestor. Only Wang Chong had been defeated in a single clash by the 3 bamboo hat men, and not even the powerful yellow scarf warrior had been able to suppress him. The man with the 3-eyed deer mask had fought with Wang Chong before. In the core of the Origin Immortal formation, he had almost been able to capture Wang Chong, but not even he had expected that Wang Chong, who had been lost to the 3 bamboo hat men, would appear here and defeat the powerful yellow scarf warrior in a single blow. Go to mortal go. Since the yellow scarf warrior can't complete his mission, kill him. Just when the man with the 3-eyed deer mask was about to step forward, a vigorous voice came from the side. The man with the golden-red tiger mask had spoken, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. The 3 of them had stood side by side, not taking part in the battle this entire time. One reason was because of their status, but the other was that they were standing by, ready to eliminate a thorn like the child of destruction at any moment. I know. He's just an ant. Let me end him. The man with the 4-horned goat mask, or rather the goat immortal, faintly smiled at Wang Chong. As he spoke, he took 2 steps forward, his expression disdainful, and his body began to exude a terrifying energy that caused the world to pale. Chapter 1560. The appearance of a mysterious youth had caused the war in the southwest to undergo an earth-shaking change. The Uzun army, which had initially been virtually invincible, suffered successive defeats in the span of a single night, losing 50 to 60,000 soldiers. One had to admit that while everyone had been excitedly thinking about completely wiping out the Annam Protectorate and flattening the Tang dynasty's western front, this had given them all a rude awakening. No one knew the origins of this mysterious youth. Even Jiao Sero and Finjie had only met him once. But now, Uzun Prime Minister, who had never even seen him, or even participated in any of the battles, was saying that he already knew the identity of this youth. Prime Minister, is what you say true? Finjie's face was filled with shock. He had heard of this Prime Minister of the Uzun Gari royal lineage for a long time, only knowing that this youth possessed extraordinary intelligence and abilities. The punishment operation that the Tang dynasty had jointly launched with Zhangzhou Jinxiong and several other prefectures had ultimately ended in failure because of this youth. Finjie didn't understand Daluan Ruozhen, but he understood the other side. No, the capital's Zhangzhou Jinxiong. Zhangzhou Jinxiong was a man of great ambition. He had always wanted to establish himself in the southwest and use his achievements to enter the imperial court. Moreover, under Zhangzhou Jinxiong's leadership, the relationship between the Tang dynasty and Mengshi Zhao had not been so stiff, and the two sides had even had a honeymoon period. Back then, Zhangzhou Jinxiong had also encouraged Mengshi Zhao to borrow Mengshi Zhao's military strength to ally with the two sides and attack the plateau. But in the end, none of these operations had succeeded. It was not Uzun Great General Huishu Wuzong, but this Prime Minister of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage, who had managed to make someone as ambitious as Zhangzhou Jinxiong settle down and guard the Annan Protectorate for several decades. But this Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage. I've long heard that the Prime Minister of Uzun has 9 acupores in his mind and is extraordinarily intelligent. Every one of them is knowledgeable. They are familiar with all the classics of the Central Plains and have also received the secret enlightenment method of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Cicadas feel the autumn wind before it blows, and they know the meaning of autumn when a leaf falls. I used to think that it was more or less an exaggeration. If this Daluan Ruozhen can determine that kid's identity just by listening to a few words, then it's really scary. Fengjia's eyes flashed and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Uzun had 4 royal families, 4 prime minister, and 1 prime minister. Daluan Ruozhen was just one of them. If Daluan Ruozhen really had this kind of ability, then the other 3 prime ministers, and the one who served the Tsimpo were truly frightening. At this moment, a hint of fear emerged in Finjie's heart. Imperial father borrowed the strength of Uzun to deal with the Tang dynasty, but Uzun himself is a wolf, and an extremely vicious one at that. If in the future Mengshi Zhao and Uzun shed all pretense of cordiality, the empire would be in dire straits. In truth, Feng Jiayi had always been reserved about borrowing the strength of the Uzun Empire to make it difficult for the Uzun cavalry to advance. Although he couldn't be considered to be vehemently opposed, he wasn't very enthusiastic either. At the very least, he was a little conflicted. The more powerful Uzun's general and minister abilities were, the more conflicted Feng Jiayi felt. Haha, Crown Prince Jiayi, what do you think? At some point, Dalawan Ruozhen had walked over and was looking at Feng Jiayi with a smirk on his face that seemed to contain a deeper meaning. It's nothing. Prime Minister is overthinking things. Feng Jiayi's heart chilled, and he hastily regained his composure. He knew that this Prime Minister was extremely perceptive, and that his thoughts were even more terrifying than he had imagined. That brat's origins are unknown. If we can learn his identity and use his weakness to deal with him, that would be the best. Feng Jiayi is willing to listen to Prime Minister's wise opinion. Ha, in truth, this isn't that difficult. Although I've never seen the youth you speak of, nor have I participated in any of those campaigns, I don't know how he commands an army. However, if we just want to determine his identity, it really isn't that difficult. I already know everything about him. Dalawan Ruozhen fanned himself as he paced back and forth, attracting everyone's attention. When it came to military affairs, one was civil, and the other was military. Wherever Huishu Wuzong was present, he rarely interfered. Most of the time, it was a matter of strategy. The art of war and strategy are all secrets of the families of ministers and generals. These are not things that an ordinary outsider can learn. Moreover, you said that he was wearing Wang Fu's armor. At this point, Dalawan Ruozhen smiled and continued. There are only two true commanders of the Annam Protectorate that Wang Yan leads. One is Wang Yan, and the other is his eldest son Wang Fu. These two are the true commanders of the army. Military affairs are a matter of great importance to the country. Which ordinary soldier would dare to casually pass on the armor of their commander? They wouldn't even dare to think about it. As soon as that youngster appeared, he took the king's talisman and wore his armor. If he wasn't from an illustrious family, rich or noble, and full of confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? Prime Minister, forgive me for saying too much, but there are countless descendants of nobility and wealth in the entire Tang dynasty. If this is all, I'm afraid that it isn't enough to deduce the identity of that youth, right? Jelifeng, the ruler of Mengshi Zhao, said with a frown. In truth, she was also rather curious about that youth. However, this curiosity wasn't admiration. Rather, it was a desire to extinguish any threat as quickly as possible. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains had far too many talents, practically innumerable. Wang Zhongxi Geshuhan, Gao Xianji, Zhang Shougui, Zhangqiu Jinsheng Wang Yan Xinyu Zhongtong. There were far too many. And now, at this crucial moment, there was another mysterious youth who was extremely skilled in the art of war. With such a powerful empire by their side, it was hard to eat or sleep well. No one knew when the Tang dynasty would be dissatisfied and send troops to destroy Mengshi Zhao, or change the dynasty and install a new emperor. This was also one of the reasons why Jelifeng wanted to rebel against Tang. As for the dangers from the Tang dynasty, especially those that could be seen, he wanted to nip every single one of them in the cradle as soon as possible to prevent them from growing into a bigger problem. Haha, if that's all, of course it wouldn't be enough. Dalawan Ruozhen chuckled, then continued. But Huishu Wuzong also said that the ones commanding the army last night were not Wang Yan or Xinyu Zhongtong. Two of the highest commanders of the Tang dynasty joining hands to launch a sneak attack on Jiao Sero was definitely not their style. To be able to command both Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong at the same time, just think about it. Who else could do that? Everyone fell silent. Huishu Wuzong and Jelifeng both sank into deep thought. None of them had considered what Dalawan Ruozhen had just said. Even Fenjie and Jiao Sero were stunned. In fact, in terms of curiosity, in terms of wanting to know more about that young man, no one was more eager than them. who had been defeated by him twice. But they really hadn't thought about what Daluan Ruozhen had said. Wang Yan is still secondary, but Xinyu Zhongtong is someone that fellow Zhangqiu Jinxiong chose. That fellow only chooses people based on loyalty. Wang Yan might hand over his military authority, but Xinyu Zhongtong definitely won't hand over his authority so easily. Unless, Wang, as if a ray of light had just flashed through everyone's mind, everything suddenly became clear. Unless that person was appointed by Zhangqiu Jinxiong. In that instant, the same thought flashed through everyone's mind. That's right. In such a short period of time, why would Xinyu Zhongtong hand over his authority? And why would he listen to that youth and work together with Wang Yan to ambush Jiao Sero? In this world, it's not that there aren't people who can order Xinyu Zhongtong around and make him lower his stance. But there are definitely only a handful of them. And Zhangqiu Jinxiong is definitely one of them. I dare say that that child definitely has a letter from Zhangqiu Jinxiong. Daluan Ruozhen waved his fan, his last words resolute and decisive. As soon as he finished speaking, the room became deathly silent. At this moment, even the emperor of Mengxi Zhao, Jelifeng, was speechless. Daluan Ruozhen had never even met the other party, but from a few words, he had deduced that the other party had a letter from Zhangqiu Jinxiong. And yet, even Jelifeng felt that what he had said was probably true. But how could Zhangqiu Jinxiong hand over his letter to someone else? That fellow has a suspicious personality, and wouldn't easily hand over his authority to someone else. On top of that, given how formidable the other party is, to be able to force Zhangqiu Jinxiong to hand over the letter to him, how could we have never heard of him before? Ha ha ha, this is where things get interesting. A bright light shone in Daluan Ruozhen's eyes. In his view, there was no longer any chance of changing the outcome of the war in the southwest. Last night's battle had only been a coincidence. The torrential rain, the darkness of night, and the fact that the Mengxi, Yusang army had not arrived at the same time had resulted in this outcome. But in the end, the fate of the Annam Protectorate had already been decided from the very start. What he was interested in now was this mysterious young man, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Who says that we haven't heard of him? It's just that His Majesty might not know of him. Of course, Zhangqiu Jinxiong wouldn't hand over his letter to someone else, let alone have Xinyu Zhongtong voluntarily hand over his authority. But if it's someone who's close to Zhangqiu Jinxiong and has the same interests, then there won't be a problem. For example, the Wang clan, Wang Yan's youngest son, and the person who built Lion City. Boom! Daluan Ruozhen's final verdict was like a stone stirring 1,000 ripples. Everyone felt as if a fierce gale had swept through them, their minds raging with great waves. Even Huishu Wuzong's heart was in turmoil. Not many people knew about the youngest son of the Wang clan, but there was no one who didn't know about the person who had built Lion City and created this huge problem for Mengxi Zhao and Uzun. And Fin Jie and Jiao Sero, who had already met Wang Chong, were even more shocked than anyone else. How could it be him? Chapter 1561. Gift. Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong glanced at each other speechless. It was clear that neither of them had expected Wang Chong to make such a move. Very soon, the two of them turned around and looked at the soldier who was carrying the two cages. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. Wang Chong had not given them a gift yet, so the two couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. The soldier quickly rushed over and placed the cages on the ground. These are Persian cats. The two pulled back the silk cloth and saw two furry and pure white creatures inside. Their eyes brightened and their faces lit up. Wang Chong had actually given them two of the most popular Arabian Persian cats in the capital. In the capital, from the princes and dukes of the imperial household to the nobility, all the women of the officials and the young ladies of the great clans loved the Arabian Persian cats the most. These Persian cats had docile and clingy personalities, making them extremely likable. As a result, they became the new favorites of the women of the officials and the young ladies of the wealthy clans. However, Arabia was tens of thousands of li from the capital, and Persian cats were far too precious to be tossed about. Thus, the majority of them died on the journey. As a result, There was no market for them in the capital, and a single cat was hard to find. And of all the Persian cats, the pure-colored Persian cats raised especially for the imperial household were the most respected, and were known as the imperial Persian cats. The 2 Arabian Persian cats that Wang Chong had found for them were snow white, without a single blemish. Their pupils were also very special, one deep blue and the other amber. With a single glance, one could not help but want to pull them into one's embrace. They were the most precious royal Persian cats. The 2 had only seen them once at Princess Enai Huang's place, and neither of them had expected Wang Chong to give them such a special gift. So cute. So pretty. Look, it's still using its paws to wash its face and scratch its beard. Yeah, look, it's actually licking my hand. Haha, it's so itchy. Both of their attention fell on the Persian cats in the cage. They squatted on the ground and kept playing with them. As for Wang Chong, he was momentarily forgotten by them. Although Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong appeared valiant and heroic, and were known as heroines, different from the delicate women of the boudoir, they were still girls in the end. They also liked those furry and cute little pets. Wang Chong had done the right thing by catering to his needs. Fortunately, I made the right choice this time. Wang Chong smiled inwardly when he saw this. He had asked Yang Hongchang to bring these 2 Persian cats of the Arabian royal family from Talis. Yang Hongchang had operated on the Silk Road for many years and knew quite a few Arab merchants. Those Persian cats were very difficult for others to obtain, but they were no problem for Yang Hongchang. The Arabs were innately skilled merchants, and as long as the price was right, they could even obtain a royal Persian cat. That's right, Wang Chong, don't Persian cats die very easily? And they're not used to the climate of the Tang dynasty. Just how did you get them? A moment later, seemingly recalling something, Bai Xiling stood up with the white Persian cat in her arms and gazed at Wang Chong curiously. Give me 100,000 taels and I'll tell you the answer. Wang Chong teased. Bastard. Bai Xiling's eyebrows rose as she prepared to strike. Haha, alright, don't hit me. I'll tell you. Persian cats love cleanliness, so their cages must be cleaned promptly, and they have to be very clean. If they're not clean, they won't eat. In addition, they need to be occasionally squeezed out some grass juice. Wang Chong chuckled. Persian cats loved cleanliness even more than humans, and from a certain perspective, they were a sort of misophobe. Not many people knew about this, and the people who sold Persian cats were mostly greasy merchants who didn't take enough care of them. This was why so many Persian cats were dying. If they knew about this, it would be much easier to sell Persian cats. After settling the 2 cats, the guards from the 2 clans that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had brought were also arranged to join the City of Steel's defense forces. On this trip to Wuxiang, Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had brought many experts from their clans. The combined forces of their 2 clans numbered more than 500. This was quite a powerful support. The Zhao and Bai clan's support for Wang Chong was self-evident. That's right, Wang Chong, you've prepared everything. So why didn't you put all your effort into building the city? Why did you build those buildings and inns instead? Bai Xiling couldn't help but ask after circling the city once. That's right, this city is too big. Such a large place is bound to take a lot of time and effort to build. How come you don't seem the least bit worried? Zhao Yadong chimed in. As the 2 strolled around with Wang Chong for so long, they gradually began to notice a strange phenomenon. Wang Chong's City of Steel had clearly slowed down after building the lowest foundation and the first floor. A large number of people had been sent into the city to build inns, restaurants, and tea houses for traveling merchants. This seemed very abnormal. Moreover, Wang Chong, as the master of this city, did not seem to be in the slightest bit worried. This made the 2 feel very strange. The 2 were not trying to pressure Wang Chong, but there were times when they had to give an account to their clans. Moreover, the 2 had come this time to probe Wang Chong, and also to see how the construction of the city was progressing. After all, the Zhao and Bai clans had invested a great deal of money into Wang Chong's City of Steel, paying a great price in blood. Haha, to do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. Relax, the construction of this city will be completed much faster than you imagine. Wang Chong grinned. How could Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong's thoughts be hidden from him? When the two spoke, their expressions were clearly distressed. They had clearly been forced. Everyone had their own difficulties, and it was already quite good that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had helped him this far. Wang Chong naturally would not make things difficult for them. And you can tell your clans that the benefits the Zhao and Bai clans will obtain will be far greater than they imagined. In addition, this city will be completed in a month. Wang Chong said. Ah! Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong stared in shock at Wang Chong. It wasn't that they didn't believe in Wang Chong, but that this city of steel was still an embryo, far from completion. Moreover, the construction of a city was time-consuming and laborious. It would already be quite impressive if it could be completed in a year. And Wang Chong's city was much larger than an ordinary city. Even though they were Wang Chong's closest friends, the two of them still felt that completing this city in a month was a fantasy. Wang Chong looked at their questioning gazes, a strange smile on his lips, but he did not reply. Facts spoke louder than words. In a month, the two of them would no longer think that he was exaggerating. Moreover, at that time, even Geshu Han and Fomin Linta will be shocked. Wang Chong inwardly chuckled to himself as he gazed at the sky. The city of steel had been making such a huge ruckus, but Fomin Linta, Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, and Insishan had still not made a move. They had only sent a few scouts to investigate, but they had done nothing else. This was rather abnormal. Wang Chong was well aware of what these great generals were planning, but alas, they would not have the chance. Time slowly passed, and 10 days later, the second batch of 50,000 craftsmen and experts from the great clans arrived to reinforce the city of steel. The second batch of components forged by the swordsmiths and sword shops of the various provinces of the Tang dynasty had all arrived. On the same night, once all the rock eagles, gerfalcons, eagles, and storks in the sky had dispersed, all the scouts lingering around the city of steel, and the Arab and Karak Spuzanu spies disguised as merchants had left, Wang Chong finally began his plan. Boom! In the darkness the earth quaked. With Wang Chong's order, a blazing furnace spat out from the northeast corner of the city of steel, and then a second, a third, a fourth. Tens of thousands of blazing furnace fires began to spread from the northeast corner of the city of steel to every corner of the city of steel. In the end, the blazing furnace fires illuminated the city of steel as if it were daytime. Begin! On the southern wall, Zhang Shouji stood shoulder to shoulder with Wang Chong, his expression grim. He swung down one arm, and boom! The heaven-shaking clattering of steel came from all around. All the 100,000 craftsmen and all the soldiers stationed around the city of steel stopped their work and joined in the construction of the walls. From the moment Zhang Shouji had first arrived in Wuxiang, a sea of steel modules had been gathered around the city. After these modules had been used to construct the foundation of the city, they had not been touched. The majority of the craftsmen began to devote themselves to the construction of the restaurants, inns, and tea houses in the city. But at this moment, as if it had been premeditated, the craftsmen began to move the steel modules and began to collectively construct the city like ants. Clang! The first hammer fell, sending sparks flying and echoing far into the darkness. Tens of thousands of modules of the city of steel began to rise in the darkness. In this period of time, all the craftsmen had become familiar with the blueprints and construction methods, and now, all of this was beginning to show its power. Boom! 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 The clattering of steel shook the heavens, converging into a tide. In the light of the furnace, the tens of thousands of modules of the city of steel were neatly constructed like fish scales, following some sort of pattern. The nearly 100,000 craftsmen worked together like a single person, all of them working together like a massive and intricate machine, constructing the city with astonishing speed. On the walls, Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong were left slack-jawed by this majestic and spectacular construction, as well as the formidable ability to coordinate and command. Impossible! Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong both came from great clans, and extremely ancient clans with a long history. In terms of strength and resources, they far surpassed the great clans of the capital. With this background, one could easily imagine the breadth of knowledge and horizons that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong possessed. But not even Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had ever seen such a magnificent sight. More than 100,000 people working in perfect formation, even more orderly than an army. This was unimaginable in the great clans. Moreover, the method Wang Chong had used to construct the city was completely different from what the world had imagined. Chapter 1562. But now that he carefully thought about it, the Tang dynasty had once had a chance. As long as he seized that chance, the Tang dynasty would have had a chance to obtain a large number of high-quality war horses and prepare for future battles. And that chance was this Turkic horse merchant called Hulayeg. However, finding Hulayeg was not easy, as his movements were erratic. He could be in the steppe of the north, the Anchi Protectorate, Talas, the Abbasid Caliphate, or even the Uzum Plateau. Wang Chong had only found Yang Hongchong, an old horse, who knew the western regions like the back of his hand. Coupled with the few bits and pieces of information he had gathered, as well as all sorts of legends, Yang Hongchong had begun to search for him more than a month in advance. This was how he had been able to track him down. Even more frightening was that Wang Chong was well aware that starting from now, in at most 3 months, everyone would lose this chance. This was because Hulayeg would quickly offend Ishbara Khagan through his pride and be completely exterminated. And without Hulayeg, no one else would be able to obtain a large number of high-quality war horses from the Turkic steppe. No one else would be able to act like Hulayeg and open up a channel for the horse trade between the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates. From then on, the name Hulayeg became extinct in the western regions and the steppe. And not long after his death, the two Khaganates completely cut off the trade in war horses. The Tang dynasty thus lost its last chance. And from then on, it was plunged into a crisis of lacking war horses. Thus, when Wang Chong heard that Hulayeg was in the western regions, he immediately rushed over. There were some things that had to be done sooner rather than later. If he missed it, it would be gone forever. Who are you? Don't you know that this is my territory? Hurry up and get out. An angry rebuke in Turkic interrupted Wang Chong's thoughts. In the room, Hulayeg had an angry expression on his face, his right hand already pressed against the scimitar at his waist. It seemed like he was ready to strike at any moment. Hulayeg, Wang Chong chuckled. Who are you? How do you know my name? Hulayeg's expression froze, and then he paled. He had always used an alias in the western region, so only a few people knew his real name. Most of them were his acquaintances. But he didn't remember knowing the young man in front of him. Don't panic. I was introduced here. Chuckling, Wang Chong took out an item from his waist. This was a black metal token. It was pitch black like ink, and there were monsters carved on it. It was completely different from the style of the Central Plains. Obviously, this wasn't something from the Central Plains. Oh, so you're from the Yang family of the Tang dynasty that Tamuj introduced. Hulayeg raised his sword-like brows and instantly relaxed. His right hand released the hilt of the scimitar at his waist, but a look of contempt appeared on his face. Tamuj is really interesting. Doesn't he know that I've never had any dealings with Han people? The Turks and the Han are natural enemies, so he actually wants me to sell a horse to a Han? How laughable. Ha ha ha. Alright, I don't care where you came from, or what you want to do here. While I'm still in a good mood, hurry up and get out of here. Beauty, come, let's keep drinking, ha ha ha. Hulayeg hugged women to his left, and right as he drank to his heart's content, the red wine dripping down his beard. He had completely forgotten about Wang Chong. Ha ha ha. Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh at these words. Not getting angry, he sat down across from Hulayeg. In the past, when Maodun surrounded Gaoting, Emperor Gaozu of the Great Han was trapped, and had no choice but to deliver 10,000 ingots of gold. In the end, Maodun retreated and Bai Ding collapsed. Even the chief and the Khagan were like this, but I didn't think that Hulayeg would have such strength of character. He's even more upright than the Khagan and doesn't love money. This one admires you. Ha ha ha, interesting, interesting, interesting. It seems I've underestimated you. Hulayeg had been sitting on the ground, drinking wine, when he heard Wang Chong's words. His eyes brightened, and he suddenly raised his head, as if he had just noticed Wang Chong's existence. All of you, get out of here. Hulayeg's eyes widened, and the beautiful Hu girls in his arms paled in fright. Screaming in fear, they scrambled out of the room. So you've come to deliver 10,000 ingots of gold to me? Hulaeg stared at Wang Chong said. Maodun besieged Gaoting was an event that both the Central Plains and the Turks knew of 1,000 years ago. At the time, Emperor Gaozu of the Great Han Liu Bang had just begun his conquest of the world, commanding an army of 1 million and commanding as many officers as there were clouds in the sky. He was feeling very pleased with himself when he happened to run into the Turks invading his borders. In the end, he led his army forward, and after encountering Maoduan's 200,000 cavalry, he was trapped at Baideng. This was the first time in the history of the continent that a large-scale force of pure infantry had encountered a force of pure cavalry. Although there seemed to be more infantrymen, everyone knew what it meant to have 200,000 cavalrymen. In the wilderness, it wouldn't be difficult to wipe out 1 million infantrymen. This was the power of a cavalry charge. It was also from that moment that the Central Plains began to truly understand the power of a large-scale cavalry force, and they began to buy horses, herd them, and raise them on a large scale. Everyone knew the final result. By the time of Emperor Wu of Han, for the sake of resolving the siege of Baideng, he had established a massive army of cavalry of the Great Han. Fighting north and south, he had swept through the Turks and utterly routed them to the north of the Heavenly Mountains, where they were unable to recover for several hundred years. They had even changed the name of Maoduan's massive steppe tribe from Xiongnu to Turk, so as to show that they had nothing to do with that humiliation. This greatly increased the might of the Han clan, and everyone knew this. Thus, even though there was the siege of Baideng, neither the Central Plains nor the Turks feared it. In fact, from a certain perspective, the Turks were even more apprehensive. However, this was clearly not what Wang Chong was trying to express. The Central Plains had always believed in the concept of family, country, and world, but the steppe was different. Even a legendary ruler of the steppe like Maodun Chanyu had been bribed by 10,000 taels of gold. Wasn't it laughable for Hulaeg to say that the Turks were at war with the Tang dynasty, and thus wouldn't sell horses to the Han? Business was business, and regardless of the relationship between the Tang dynasty and the Turks, Hulaeg was a Turkic horse merchant who could roam the western regions like a fish in water. He would never care about any standpoint, nor would he care about patriotism. What he cared about was only one thing, and that was benefits. As long as there were enough benefits, he would probably be able to sell out Ishbara Kagan. What is 10,000 taels of gold to you? The mighty Hulaeg, the largest horse merchant of the steppe, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, have so many high-quality warhorses. Surely you don't just want to earn 10,000 taels of gold? Wang Chong indifferently said, a pleased expression on his face. Buzz! A bright light flashed through Hulaeg's eyes as he stared at Wang Chong for 3 seconds. Suddenly, he put on his open robe, a serious expression finally appearing on his face. It seems like I underestimated you. Your ambitions are truly not small. Hulaeg's tone suddenly changed, completely different from before. Speak. How many warhorses do you want? 3,000? 5,000? 8,000? 10,000? Wang Chong broke into laughter, but he only shook his head. 20,000? Hulaeg's face flickered. The people who came here to buy warhorses usually bought 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or 5,000. Anyone who could buy 5,000 at once was a major client. After all, 5,000 high-quality Turkic warhorses was enough to form a cavalry army of 5,000, a considerable number. As for 20,000 taels of gold, he had yet to sell them. If this Han youth could buy 20,000 warhorses, Hulaeg would have to admit that he had greatly underestimated him. Haha, 20,000? Sir Hulaeg, aren't you looking down on me too much? Could it be that Sir, the #1 horse merchant of the Turks, is only able to buy so few warhorses? Wang Chong faintly smiled. The first batch of Wuxiang soldiers he had trained numbered 5,000, and these were the best cavalry. The nimbleness they had trained in the mountains, and the extreme speed of their warhorses, allowed them to maximize their advantage. A qualified Wuxiang horseman could make 16 turns in a second, /11 times. and even duck through a horse's belly 3 times to get to the other side. These abilities were not something that could be described with the words riding a horse, sitting steadily, or cavalry. Not even the Turkic elites, who were hailed as the elites of horseback, were capable of such feats. They were the best cavalrymen, and also the strongest cavalrymen. Wang Chong had to equip all 5,000 Wuxiang soldiers with war horses. And Wuxiang village still had 50 to 60,000 people. From this aspect, Wang Chong needed at least 50 to 60,000 war horses. And in the future wars, the Tang dynasty would lose a large number of war horses. For the sake of reserves, a conservative estimate suggested that he would need at least 3 to 400,000. In truth, Wang Chong estimated that if it was for the sake of the Tang dynasty, it would be best if he could get 7 to 800,000. The more the better. As long as it's on the steppe, there's no warhorse that I, Hulieg, can't get my hands on. Sir, hurry up and tell me, just how many warhorses do you want? Hulieg's face instantly turned red from Wang Chong's provocation. As a horse merchant, he could say anything, but his ability to sell horses could not be underestimated. This was also Hulieg's Achilles heel. At least this number. Wang Chong faintly smiled, and to Hulieg's shock, he raised 3 fingers. 300,000? 300,000? Are you kidding? Hulieg blurted out in alarm. Even if he was experienced and had interacted with various factions, he would not be able to match up to Hulieg. He had never sold so many warhorses before. Moreover, 300,000 was not a small number. In the past, Hulieg had only been able to freely buy and sell warhorses, because he didn't have a lot of them. Throwing them onto the steeds of the steppe didn't mean much. Moreover, the warhorses would breed every day, so no one would notice if some of them disappeared. But 300,000? Only a blind man wouldn't be able to see this number. Even the Khan would probably notice him. Heh, so that's how it is. It seems like I've misjudged you. So Sir Hulieg wasn't the person I was looking for. Seeing this, Wang Chong suddenly sneered. He had originally intended to stay here. But now, as soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and, under Hulieg's dumbfounded gaze, turned and left. Chapter 1563. Wait a moment. Sir, please wait a moment. I didn't say that it was impossible. Seeing that Wang Chong was about to walk out the door, Hulieg grew anxious, knocking over the silver plate of grapes in front of him as he hurriedly followed. If there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. Why are you in such a rush to do business? Does this mean that Sir is confident that it can be done? Wang Chong stopped and turned to ask. I just feel that the number is a little too large and a little difficult. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. If you give me half a year. Not half a year, 3 months at most. Wang Chong said. Sir, are you serious? Hulieg said. Wang Chong gave a serious nod. It wasn't that he didn't want to give him time, nor was he being too harsh. It was that this bastard would be dead in 3 months. What use would there be in making a deal and signing a pile of treaties? Of course, Hulieg himself definitely wouldn't be able to sense this. Moreover, Wang Chong didn't really have any hopes of getting 700,000 or 800,000 warhorses from Hulieg. That was simply impossible. Unless the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates were insane, they would never allow such a massive cavalry army to appear in the Tang dynasty. And raising 700,000 or 800,000 warhorses was no small number. The Tang dynasty simply didn't have such a large pasture to graze on. In truth, let alone 700,000 or 800,000, even 300,000 was a number that Wang Chong had casually mentioned. Getting 100,000 warhorses from Hulieg was already a massive harvest. The Tang dynasty had never bought so many warhorses before. It wasn't that they didn't want to part with the money, but that they simply didn't have the means to do so. At the very least, the Khans of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates wouldn't be so foolish as to openly sell so many warhorses to fund their opponents. Let me think it over. This isn't the place to discuss business. Sir, please follow me, Hulieg said, his expression turning much more cautious. 300,000 warhorses was no trifling matter, and far too many aspects were involved. Hulieg had to proceed with caution. Hulaeg did not leave through the main entrance of the pleasure house, but through a special winding path on the third floor. This winding path was a dead end on the outside, but there was another path on the inside. It was winding and dark, leading straight to the surface. No wonder it's so difficult to track him down. As Wang Chong followed Hulaeg down the winding path, he couldn't help but sigh. Hulaeg was the #1 horse merchant of the Turks, and many people knew of him, but very few of them had been able to find him. In fact, many legends about his whereabouts and past were spread after his death. Otherwise, even Yang Hongchang, who traveled the western region all year round, would not be able to find his whereabouts, let alone others. After entering the pleasure house, Wang Chong emerged from another tea house nearby. From there, they boarded a bronze carriage. The carriage passed through the dense crowd and went back and forth in the winding alleys. Finally, they entered a mansion that looked ordinary from the outside, but was extremely luxurious from the inside. Upon entering the residence, Hulaeg did not lead Wang Chong to the reception hall or inner chambers. Instead, he opened a secret door and took Wang Chong to an underground passage. "Sir Hulaeg, where are we going?" A few moments later, Wang Chong suddenly said as he followed behind Hulaeg. "We're here, we're almost there. This is the place." Hulaeg, who was leading the way, suddenly turned his head. Clang! With a metallic clatter, a thick and heavy metal fence, weighing at least several thousand jin, dropped from the sky, blocking the path between Wang Chong and Hulaeg. Wang Chong's brow creased, but before he could say anything, boom! Another thick and heavy metal fence descended from the sky, blocking Wang Chong's path. For a moment, Wang Chong was like a turtle in a jar, trapped between the two fences. "Sir Hulaeg, what are you doing?" Wang Chong asked, but there was no hint of panic on his face. "Ha ha ha." Hulaeg heartily laughed, a cunning and crafty light in his eyes. "The young Marquis of the Tang dynasty. I didn't think that we would meet here. Who could have expected that you would disguise yourself and run off to the western regions? If I hand you over, I'm sure that many people will be willing to pay a high price. At the very least, the Tsempo of Uzan and His Highness the Crown Prince of Mengshi Zhao will definitely be willing." Hulaeg finally tore off his disguise and revealed his true face. Wang Chong's expression froze for a moment, and then a hint of solemnity appeared on his face. "When did you recognize me?" Wang Chong said. He had to admit that the development of this matter had somewhat exceeded his expectations. Wang Chong had not expected Hulaeg to recognize his disguise. This #1 Turkic horse merchant was far more cunning, crafty, and cautious than he had imagined. "Ha ha ha, 300,000 war horses? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Anyone who comes to me to do business can buy 8,000 horses at most. Even the king of the Sher Kingdom, who's said to be the wealthiest person in the world, only bought 5,000 horses from me at one time. With such a large number and such a serious attitude, do you think that an ordinary person can afford this? To be able to name a number of 300,000, you're definitely not from the western regions, but from the interior of the Tang dynasty, and you have a close relationship with the Tang dynasty. However, those Han people in the Great Tang Imperial Court would never come here to do business with me. The western regions have been abuzz recently with news that the young Marquis, the one who was personally conferred the title of the young Marquis by the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty, who defeated Huishu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozan, Jelifeng, and Duangichuan in the southwest, has come to Qixi and built a city of steel there. I've looked into it, and the young Marquis described in the legends looks exactly like you. Young Master Wang, am I correct?" With these last words, Hulaeg had a smug look on his face, looking nothing like his usual boorish and unsophisticated self. "I truly underestimated you. A trifling horse merchant actually has such intelligence and insight. It's no wonder you've been able to roam the western regions like a fish in water for so many years. It seems that I'll have to learn a lesson in the future." Wang Chong shook his head and couldn't help but chuckle. Even the wise are bound to make a mistake. Wang Chong was forced to admit that he had truly underestimated Hulaeg. "However, even if that's the case, do you really think that you can trap me with just these things?" Wang Chong glanced at the two heavy metal fences, a smirk on his face. He truly had not expected Hulaeg to recognize him. But this was no simple miscalculation. At times, when one's martial strength reached a certain level, there was no need to care too much about one's opponent. This was especially true outside of the battlefield. Ha ha ha. The mighty young Marquis of the Tang Dynasty, a martial arts expert who massacred 10,000 people on the Divine Mountain of Heaven in the southwest. How could I possibly be careless? If I didn't know this, why do you think I would insist on bringing you here? A crafty light appeared in Hulaeg's eyes. Many people believed him to be careless, but they didn't know that he was just hiding his true strength. Although he was in the business of selling horses, it was fraught with danger. Gathering information, understanding all the famous figures of the world, as well as potential trading partners, was something that a qualified horse merchant had to do in advance. I know that you're very strong, and I also know that you have a Wuxia steel sword, but it's useless. Do you see those fences around you? Those are the finest steel I got from Arabia. This steel is incredibly tough, and it doesn't even need to undergo any special processing to be made into the sharpest Arabian saber or sword. Even if you have a Wuxia steel sword, no matter how sharp your Wuxia steel sword is, it still won't be able to cut through these fences. In addition, do you know why I've said so much to you? It's because I know that you won't be able to escape. No, you're dead for sure. At this point, Hulaeg heartily laughed. The mighty young Marquis of the Tang Dynasty, the man who had recently shaken the world and attracted the attention of the world, had finally died at his hand. This was something to be proud of. If the Kaghan knew, he would probably heavily reward him. Wang Chong's eyes were half closed, his expression calm as he silently gazed at Hulaeg with a smirk on his face. Since you know that I have a Wuxia steel sword, do you know how sharp my sword is? Wang Chong suddenly said. Buzz! Hulaeg's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Sharp? If there's no need. Once you're dead, I'll personally find your sword from your corpse and test it out myself. Okay, you can go in peace. As he spoke, Hulaeg suddenly stamped his foot on the ground nearby. Clank-lang. He could hear the sound of gears turning, and then the ground suddenly emptied, revealing a massive bottomless hole. Before Wang Chong could react, he and the fence began to plummet into the abyss. No, this was no longer a fence. It was now clear that the place where Hulaeg had led Wang Chong to stand was actually a massive cage, and the fence that had fallen down was a part of this cage. When Hulaeg opened the trap, Wang Chong and this massive cage began to descend into the ground. What a formidable trap! The wind howled on both sides, as the scenery around him receded like a stream of light. As Wang Chong descended from the ground, even he had to admit that Hulaeg's trap was far more elaborate than he had imagined. Hulaeg's goal was not to use the cage to trap Wang Chong, but to trap Wang Chong, and then throw him into this bottomless pit. Even if he didn't die from the fall, he could be trapped underground. No matter how capable Wang Chong was, as long as he couldn't break free of the cage, he would be denied food and water for 10 some days, and his death was assured. These thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, and he quickly regained his composure. The cage fell very quickly, and in just a few moments, Wang Chong could no longer see the entrance to the pit. His surroundings were pitch black, making it impossible to determine his bearings. Chapter 1564. Gujulai, what are you planning to do? Don't forget, that brat is a Marquis of the Tang Dynasty. Do you dare to act against him? A Hu general called out from the crowd. Haha, you might be afraid of him, but I'm not. Gujulai stood on the hollow metal table, his expression savage, and his eyes gleaming with a savage light. As long as you dare to follow me, I'll teach him a lesson. He's just a half-grown brat, and the hair on his mouth hasn't even grown out yet. Do you want to listen to him? And don't forget, how did Lord Fomenlinta treat you in the past? Did he give you all any good missions? Now is the time to take revenge for Milord. Don't you want to take revenge for Milord? That's right. Milord has shown us great kindness. If we don't take revenge for Milord, won't we be the same as those cowardly Han? That's right. Take revenge for Milord. So what if the imperial court ordered it? We should submit a memorial to the imperial court and have them release my lord. At the mention of great General Fomenlinta, everyone was instantly moved by Gujulai. Haha, good. As long as you follow me, let's not talk about killing him. At the very least, I'll make it so that he can no longer have a foothold in the Chishi Protectorate in Scram. In the territory of the Hu, we who should be the ones in charge. Gujulai saw that it was about time, and immediately began to encourage them. Good. Well said. In the territory of the Hu should be the ones in charge. Gudali's words made the blood of the group of people boil. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hall was filled with a thunderous roar, as if there was a landslide or a tsunami. My lord, what do we do? The cheers of the crowd rose from the hall, passing through the roof and spreading far, far away. Several hundred meters away from the Protectorate headquarters, several cavalrymen had gathered together. One of the young Hu turned his head and uneasily looked at the Hu general behind him. This is troublesome. Kibayi pretended not to hear, his eyes fixed on the distance. Gujulai was one of Fomenlinta's trusted aides, but he did not have any real power at first. However, with his identity as a trusted aide and his ability to motivate people, Gujulai's reputation in the Chishi Protectorate was even higher than that of the commander of the Uzun defense line. In addition, Gujulai's views were completely different from his. This was also the reason why he did not enter the hall. Wang Chong isn't as easy to deal with as you think. Ibayi recalled the scene of Wang Chong charging through the triangular gap, leading the 5,000 Wuxian cavalry, and sweeping through everything before finally killing Dian Mangpoch. A chill ran through Hibaye's heart. That youth from the City of Steel's Tang dynasty was definitely the most frightening opponent on the battlefield. He would rather be his ally than his enemy. Let's go. Hibayi turned his horse around and quickly disappeared in the direction of the Uzun highlands. Meanwhile, as carrier pigeons flew to the various borders, the news that Wang Chong had become the new Chishi Protector General began to spread. Unlike the complicated reactions in the Chishi Protectorate headquarters, the news was much simpler in the various borders of the Tang dynasty. What? The City of Steel's Wang Chong has become Chishi Protector General? In the Anshi Protectorate headquarters, Gao Xinji's eyes widened in disbelief at this news. How could this be? How could those old officials of the court agree? Putting aside everything else, his martial arts aren't even at the peak of the Saint Martial realm, and there are so many experienced generals in the army. Were they all rejected? The old officials of the court truly didn't agree, but the King of Song stood his ground and recommended him. In addition, his martial arts truly aren't enough, so he's only temporarily acting Protector General, not the true Protector General. In addition, I've investigated. Feng Chongqing was standing not far from Gao Xinji. He looked up at his commander, hesitated for a moment, and then continued. After a moment of hesitation, he continued. Just before the imperial court's order, he ambushed the Black Wolf Yabgu at the Chishi Armory and killed a good Alan, as well as the 5,000 Turkic elites a good Alan had brought with him. Buzz! Gao Xinji shivered at Feng Chongqing's words, but he quickly calmed down. Wang Chong had just killed the Uzun Brigadier General Dian Mangpoch at the Battle of the Triangular Gap, and annihilated the White Braves that had intimidated the western regions. In a little more than a month, Wang Chong had killed the Black Wolf Yabgu and a good Alan. In less than 2 months, 2 of the most famous generals of Chishi had died at Wang Chong's hands. At this moment, not even Gao Xinji could say anything. When the all is in the bag, it's obvious at the end. It seems like the light of the youngest son of the Wang clan can't be concealed. Gao Xinji sighed. At this moment, his heart was filled with emotions. He was not a Han, so his background was completely different from that of the other Han generals. From an ordinary infantry soldier to the current Anshi Protector General, Gao Xinji had put in so much effort, so much blood, and so much effort, just to stand out among Fomenlinta's subordinates and escape his control. Gao Xinji had experienced countless dangers and barely escaped death. This was completely different from Wang Chong's meteoric rise, reaching the position of interim Protector General in just a year. Even Gao Xinji had to admit that he was a little jealous, feeling like the new waves of the Yangtze River were replacing the old. But even so, Gao Xianji had to admit that Wang Chong's current accomplishments had not only been due to his birth and luck. The talent, and art of command that he had displayed in these past few battles had been transcendent and outstanding. Even an imperial great general like Gao Xianji had been stunned. Wang Chong's abilities truly had reached a level that far surpassed his peers. Even Go Xianji himself, at the age of 17, couldn't compare to Wang Chong. Not only that, my lord, if that Wang Chong becomes the acting Qixi Protector General, many of our strategies will have to change. We can no longer simply suppress and resist. Qixi is responsible for transporting our supplies and soldiers. And in the future, we will need to make many requests of them. So we will have to interact with them. Feng Chongqing said, a hint of apprehension in his eyes. At the start, although Wang Chong was a member of a clan of ministers and generals, the grandson of Duke Jiao, the son of Heaven's disciple, and the young Marquis, this was still the western border, a place far away from the emperor. There were many things that Gao Xianji and Feng Chongqing did not care about. But now that Wang Chong had become the acting Qixi Protector General and seized control of the road to Qixi, everything had changed. They had to admit that the imperial court's order had truly caught them off guard. Neither of them had expected this. Gao Xianji said nothing, but his thick brows creased. It was clear that he was thinking the same thing as Feng Chongqing. But my lord does not need to worry too much. There are many who in Qixi, and the young Marquis still has a very long way to go before he can truly become Protector General. Once he has overcome this trial, we can consider getting in touch with him. Feng Chongqing said. That's all we can do. Gao Xianji gave a long sigh. At the same time, in the distant Big Dipper city of Longxi, the news that Wang Chong had become Qixi Protector General caused a stir that was no less shocking than the one in Anxi. A 17-year-old Imperial Protector General? How could there be such a thing? Not only was it approved by the Imperial Court, even His Majesty has permitted it. Geshu Han was in a state of shock as he held the news from the capital. Not even when the king of generals of the Uzan Empire, the White Lion Great General Witadra Konglo, had appeared had he been so shocked. That was because it was truly too surprising. He had been paying attention to the debate in the Imperial Court this entire time. So many officials had recommended so many experienced candidates for Qixi Protector General. But Geshu Han had never expected that the final result would be the unthinkable of the Northwest, Wang Chong. In truth, it wasn't just Geshu Han. All the officers of the Big Dipper army at his side were in a state of deep shock. When the news from the capital reached this place, it was like a deep water bomb, giving everyone an unprecedented shock. Unbelievable. In just 1 year, he became Qixi Protector General. There's also the Qixi Armory established by the imperial household in Qixi. Our Big Dipper Protectorate Army needs to go there every year to collect equipment. In this way, our Longxi Big Dipper Army will be under his control in the future. Did I hear it wrong? Protector General, with his current achievements, his name will probably be left in the annals of history, admired for thousands of years to come. But isn't he too young? Why did the imperial court approve it? This won't convince the masses. Convince the masses? Do you still think he's an ordinary young man? In the War of the Southwest, he killed more than 400,000 soldiers of the Mengxi Yusang army, and now he's killed Dian Mangpoj and Agud Alan, and countless Uzan and Turkic warriors have been buried with them. He's a god of death. Do you think that the imperial court just casually recommended him? His current achievements aren't something that the imperial court can ignore just because it wants to. In the hall, every officer of the Big Dipper army was deeply stunned. When Wang Chong had first arrived in Wuxiang and begun to build the city of steel, everyone had treated him as an outsider. Even though he had made heaven-shaking contributions in the Southwest, in the eyes of everyone else, he was still a half-grown brat. A single success didn't prove anything. Sometimes it was luck, sometimes it was chance. It didn't mean that one's strength was extraordinary or outstanding. Perhaps it was just a flash in the pan. But no one could have expected that Wang Chong would not only build the massive city of steel in Wuxiang, but he would also make great contributions, defeating the Uzan, defeating the Turks, killing important generals like Dian Mangpoj and Agud Alan, and finally ascending to the position of Chishi Protector General. Chapter 1565. Wang Chong had never seen the Anqi Protectorate army before, much less come into contact with the strongest army of the western regions. But at this moment, they had used their own methods to leave the deepest impression on Wang Chong. This was the backbone of the Tang dynasty. Clang! In a cold flash of light, Wang Chong unsheathed the sword at his waist and pointed it at the Arabs. All soldiers, hear my order. Attack at full speed. Boom! The earth quaked as Wang Chong gave his order. A moment later, the more than 100,000 Chishi reinforcements that had been standing motionless atop the hills suddenly began to pour toward Talas. Kail! Kail! The first to charge out from the hills was the invincible great General Li Sai and his 5,000 Wuxian cavalry, all armed to the teeth. Clang! A dazzling war halo erupted from beneath Li Sai's feet and rapidly spread to cover the entire army. And then a second, a third, a fourth. In the blink of an eye, thousands of war halos had erupted, enveloping the entire Wuxian army and turning the 5,000 Wuxian cavalry into a moving fortress. Boom! The 5,000 cavalry charged forward like a storm, their momentum enough to shake the heavens and overturn the seas. Not even an army of thousands would be a match for them. Kail! Kail! Following closely behind the Wuxian cavalry was the second echelon of cavalry from the Chishi Protectorate and Annam Protectorate, their halos beneath their feet, as they charged down from the hills like a flood toward the distant battlefield. Behind them were thousands of chariots and troop transports, pulled by war horses as they galloped into the distance. All the war chariots and transport vehicles maintained a strict formation, even during the charge. There was not the slightest bit of disorder. Charge! At the same time, on the left and right flank of the army, more than 10,000 regular soldiers of greater and lesser valor, Gonka people, and other mercenaries of the western regions roared and charged out. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves, more than 100,000 people from the Chishi Protectorate were like a surging ocean, surging over a hill, covering the mountains and plains, and charging into the distance. The Tang people! It's the Tang people! Get ready! Quickly change direction. East, gather quickly! Infantry, raise your shields! All cavalry, prepare to attack! Screams resounded through the army. In the face of the simultaneous charge of more than 100,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty, the Arabs, who had been attacking the city of Talas in an orderly fashion, instantly fell into chaos. Wang Chong's previous judgment was flawless, and at this moment, it appeared without any error. When more than 300,000 Arab soldiers were focused on besieging the city of Talas, it was almost impossible to gather the army in a short amount of time. A small ship could easily turn around, but a large ship could not. This string of orders caused the more than 300,000 Arab soldiers to fall into chaos. Get ready! Gather! Just when the Chishi Protectorate was preparing to charge, a dignified and loud voice rang out from the easternmost side. This voice instantly silenced the chaotic battlefield. On the eastern side of the battlefield, the disorderly Arab soldiers seemed to have been summoned, calming down and rapidly gathering. Second, the third formation retreat. The 10th formation advance. Bum bum bum. With this clear and precise order, one Arab infantry after another stepped forward, their massive infantry shields firmly planted on the ground. Each of these shields was nearly as tall as a man, sturdy, and these countless shields formed a steel wall on the eastern edge of the battlefield. Behind this steel wall, the disorderly army regained its order, and square formation after square formation formed into countless formidable defensive formations. In a few short moments, more than 30,000 infantry and 40,000 cavalry had gathered on the eastern edge of the battlefield. This force was enough to deal with more than 100,000 enemies. Rumble! At this moment, the earth rumbled as the 70,000 soldiers parted like a wave. An Arab general with a majestic aura like a storm slowly rode out from the rear. He wore a golden-crowned hat and golden armor, and he was mounted on a sturdy red Arabian steed. He was like a god as he appeared before everyone. The surrounding Arab soldiers lowered their heads in respect and awe at the sight of this general. Umar. He was one of the most famous generals of the Arabian Empire's East, as well as one of Governor of the East Abu Muslim's most valiant generals. In the Arabian Empire, he had another name, Arabian Arrow. Umar was famed for his iron and blood. He had once led the empire's warriors in exterminating some foreign countries and scorching their lands. In the East, he wielded immense authority and rallying power. The appearance of Umar caused the soldiers to calm down, as if they had found their pillar of support. Even Abdullah and the 7,000 cavalry, who had been forced to retreat, quickly calmed down and rejoined the army. Under Umar's command, the soldiers gathered together like a ball of fire. The chaos was obliterated, replaced by a vigorous energy that made Umar's figure seem even larger. All soldiers, hear my order. Stop the enemy with all your might. Anyone who retreats will die. Clang! A dazzling and sharp saber was raised over his head, gleaming with cold light. Umar's eyes were like lightning as his thunderous voice resounded over the battlefield. Yes, General Umar. We swear to serve General to the death. The 70,000 Arab soldiers roared in unison, their voices echoing over the battlefield. In just a few moments, the Arab soldiers on the east side had finished adjusting and taken up a defensive formation. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but show a hint of concern in his eyes. The Arabs were the only faction in the world that could threaten the Tang dynasty, a faction that could stand on equal footing with the Tang dynasty. Moreover, based on their quick reactions, the Arabs displayed a fighting power that Meng Shizhao and Uzun could not compare to. Very fast reactions, but it's useless. A harsh light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes. The Arabs truly were a stronger opponent than Meng Shizhao and Uzun. But the Tang dynasty had single-handedly restrained Meng Shizhao, Uzun, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, and many other powerful existences. This battle would decide who was the strongest empire in the world. Hiya! Wang Chong squeezed his steed's abdomen and charged down from the peak of the hill. Rumble! The earth quaked as the more than 100,000 Chishi reinforcements surged into the distance like a massive wave. Cavalry and infantry covered every corner of the battlefield, the distance between the two sides shrinking. Ready! At the same time, the Arabs gave their orders. Clang clang clang. Massive spears were mounted on shields, their tips aimed at the charging Tang dynasty soldiers. Behind these shieldmen were abnormally large Arab warhorses, their hooves thundering in the wind. The tens of thousands of Arab cavalry on the backs of these horses were all bulging with muscle, their eyes abnormally vicious as they stared at the enemy, fully prepared for battle. Arabia was a country of war, and it was precisely through constant war and conquest that it had become the largest empire on the continent. No matter what kind of opponent they faced, the Arabs would never easily retreat. Offense is the best defense. This was a principle that every Arab firmly believed in. The Tang dynasty soldiers were getting closer and closer, the galloping of hooves growing more urgent. The Arabs were leaning forward, their veins bulging, a sign that they were about to strike. The atmosphere on the battlefield was extremely tense. 300 steps. 200 steps. The Tang people were getting closer and closer, and when they were only 100 steps away, countless black halos shot out from beneath the feet of the Arabs. These halos were completely different from the Tang dynasty's halo of thorns. Each of these halos was branded with a black hexagram, and these tens of thousands of black halos joined together, transforming the 70,000 Arab soldiers on the eastern side of the battlefield into a terrifying black fortress. Rumble! Ney's horse neighed as 20 to 30,000 Arab cavalry charged like a storm from the rear. At almost the same time, clang! The 5,000 Wuxian cavalry charged forward with the clear cry of their swords. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of countless people, there was an earth-shattering rumble as the two armored horsemen collided heavily with each other at the speed of lightning. At that moment, all was silent. Heaven and earth were silent, and even time seemed to have stopped. Ah! In a few short moments, screams filled the air as countless Arab cavalry were tossed into the air like scarecrows, flying more than 100 feet into the air. The 5,000 Wuxian cavalry led by Li Sai were like a sharp sword stabbing into the tens of thousands of Arab cavalry. The Arab sabers and swords slashed at them from all sides, but they were all blocked by the meteoric metal on the Wuxian cavalry and repelled. All soldiers, hear my order. Charge with me and kill them all. Those who offend the Han will be executed, no matter how far away they are. Li Sai's eyes blazed with light as he became like a fierce tiger. With a furious roar, he raised his massive Wuxia steel sword and cleaved an Arab horseman and his horse in two. No armor could stop the sharp Wuxia steel sword. Bang bang bang. One collision after another resounded over the battlefield as the Wuxian cavalry charged forward. The tens of thousands of Arab cavalry were no match for the 5,000 Wuxian cavalry. Like dominoes, they were knocked down and trampled by their horses. Chapter 1566. Marquis, you were looking for me? Zhang Shouji respectfully bowed in front of Wang Chong. After 2 days of battle, the busiest person in the Tang dynasty army had been Zhang Shouji. In the 2 days of battle, the busiest person in the Tang dynasty army had been Zhang Shouji. He was the highest civil engineer in all of Talas, and one of the most formidable in the entire Tang dynasty. Whether it was the construction of the 2 steel defense lines, or the several hundred steel catapults on the walls of Talas, Zhang Shouji had personally built all of them. From the southwest to the northwest, Zhang Shouji's role was only getting more and more important. One could say that even though he didn't know any martial arts, his importance in all of Qixi was probably second only to Wang Chong. This is for you. You should strengthen the 2 defense lines. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a blueprint and handed it over. This was a blueprint that he had redesigned after the conclusion of the battle, based on the current situation and the characteristics of the 3 sides. Other than Wang Chong, Zhang Shouji, and a few of his core disciples, no one else could understand these blueprints. Relax. Leave this matter to me. Zhang Shouji glanced at the blueprint and quickly nodded. The military situation was urgent, and the lives of more than 100,000 soldiers were at stake. Zhang Shouji did not dare to tarry. He took the blueprint and hurriedly left. Li Sai, I'll leave the matters here to you. Strengthen the defenses and keep an eye on the movements of Uzan, the Western Turks, and the Arabs. If anything happens, inform me at any time. Once Zhang Shouji had left, Wang Chong continued to issue orders. This general will go. Li Sai sternly said. Suki Chin Bin. Hurry up and repair the ballistae. Prepare for battle at any moment. Yes, Marquis. The pair loudly replied. After taking care of everything, Wang Chong passed through the gates of Talas with a wave of his sleeve. Talas had sentries every few steps and all kinds of military fortresses, bazaars and halls, all constructed of massive stone. Although it was not as luxurious or beautiful as the Great Tang of the Central Plains, it had its own grandeur. Moreover, from the layout of the city, one could faintly see that this strategic economic and military center, on the Silk Road of the Western regions, had once been a prosperous city. Lord Protector General, this way please. My Lord and General Wang are already waiting inside. Upon seeing Wang Chong, an officer of the Anxi Protectorate Army respectfully greeted him. Wang Chong nodded. Lead the way. After passing through the corridors, Wang Chong saw the armored Gao Xianji in the main hall of Talas. At his side were Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, his big brother Wang Fu, and the new Karluk chiefs Guli and Ferganan. The moment they saw Wang Chong enter, everyone turned to look at him. Haha, Wang Chong, you've come. We were in the middle of our calculations, and everyone else is here except for you. Gao Xianji had been in the middle of a discussion with his generals, but when he saw Wang Chong, he immediately walked around the model of Talas and went up to welcome him, a relaxed smile on his lips. The others didn't react when they saw this scene, but a brown-bearded man with a powerful aura beside Cheng Qianli had a shocked expression on his face. Gao Xianji had a proud personality, and in the western regions, he was known as the Anxi war god. All the tribal chiefs had to lower their heads in front of Gao Xianji. He had followed Gao Xianji for 10 years, but he had never seen him so courteous to anyone. No, this was no longer just being courteous. From the fact that Gao Xianji was willing to personally welcome that young man in front of everyone, it was clear that in Gao Xianji's mind, this young man was of the same status and importance as him, an existence that Gao Xianji viewed as equal. I've kept you waiting. Wang Chong paid no attention to anything else. After returning a bow to Gao Xianji and exchanging some pleasantries, he strode up to the model of Talas in the center of the hall and began to examine it. This model was completely different from the one Wang Chong had used in Qixi. The details were much more detailed and complete. Creating a model was a basic ability of a general. Sometimes it was possible to see through a sandbox and see a general's abilities. The Anqi Protectorate Army's battle model has been meticulously planned out, from the terrain around Talas, the hills and valleys, to the small ravines and ravines of the battlefield. Everything has been taken into account. From this, Gao Xianji truly lives up to his reputation as the wall of the Tang dynasty, the Anqi war god. Wang Chong pensively gazed at the model. "My lord, I'm too polite." As Wang Chong was examining the model, he suddenly heard a soft voice in his ear. This voice was coarse, deep, and heavily accented. One could tell at a glance that it was a Hu. Wang Chong turned his head and immediately saw a boorish face with a particularly striking brown beard. Wang Chong said nothing, only gave him a questioning look. This one is the leader of the Ferganan Banahan, paying respects to Lord Protector General. In the future, when Lord Protector General has the time, I hope that you will come to our Ferganan for a chat. Banahan will definitely be waiting for you. Banahan gave a slight bow, an extremely respectful expression on his face. It's him. Wang Chong hadn't paid much attention at the start, but upon hearing the name Ferganan, a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Only with Wanha Peluo and the Karluks as the vanguard could the loyalty of an ally of the Tang dynasty be even more apparent. In the entire history of the Tang dynasty, Ferganan and Banahan were extremely rare, loyal allies of the Tang dynasty. Whether in times of triumph or defeat, they would remain unswervingly loyal to the Tang dynasty. Even after the defeat at Talas, they had not wavered in the slightest. In a place like the western regions, where the culture of the Central Plains was uncivilized, and the countries liked to sway left and right, this was an extremely rare and precious trait. Wang Chong instantly had a good impression of him. Kagan is too polite. Wang Chong faintly smiled, a thought emerging in his mind. Since this is our first meeting, this one just so happens to have a gift for Kagan. Oh, Banahan had originally intended to make a simple greeting, but these words immediately piqued his curiosity. I heard that the Khan has a great flame crow technique, which is a secret technique passed down in the palace. But because of its long history, coupled with the internal strife of the palace and various other reasons, the technique is incomplete, so it is difficult for the Khan to make further progress. I have an incantation that may be able to help the Khan complete the Great Flame Crow technique, and help the Khan break through the bottleneck and reach a higher level. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Lord Protector General, is this true? Banahan's eyes widened at these words, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. He didn't dare to believe his ears. There was such a thing. At this moment, even Gao Xianji couldn't help but lean over. Wang Chong silently smiled. There was truly no need to doubt the Farahan's loyalty, but as the chief of the Farahan tribe, Banahan's strength was not very famous in the western regions. Even Wanha Pelua was firmly above him. This could only be described as a pity. Wang Chong had read a few records, so he knew that the crux of the problem lay in the legendary Great Fire Crow art of the Farahan tribe. This legendary art had become incomplete due to a famous internal conflict within the Farahan tribe, resulting in the Farahan Kagan's accomplishments being extremely limited. This problem persisted until the future Great Calamity arrived, when all of the martial arts were gathered and mutually verified. Only after everyone's wisdom and experience were gathered was this problem solved. It was only when Wang Chong saw Banahan's Farahan Kagan that he suddenly realized this point. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try, Wang Chong said. Calling over a guard, Wang Chong brought over a brush, ink and paper. He quickly wrote down the mnemonic for the Great Fire Crow art on paper and gave it to Ferguson. Banahan treated it like a precious treasure. After this small interlude, everyone turned their attention back to the sand table. Although we've won the battles of the last 2 days, we still can't let our guard down. The first to speak was Cheng Qianli. As the Vice Protector General of the Anqi Protectorate Army, Cheng Qianli had a great deal of authority on the battlefield. Dalawan Ruozan still hasn't retreated, and Abu Muslim still has his main force. Most importantly, he still hasn't personally entered the field. We don't know how many moves he has up his sleeves, or how many soldiers he has in reserve. The word soldiers in reserve instantly caused the mood in the hall to turn heavy. Everyone knew that the Arabs loved to fight, and Talas was too close, allowing them to recruit soldiers from the rear at any time. In truth, the Arabs had been recruiting soldiers this entire time. This was why, in the 2 months that the Anqi Protectorate Army had been fighting with the Arabs, Abu Muslim's soldiers had only been increasing, not decreasing. When Wang Chong had arrived at Talas, there were still more than 300,000 soldiers stationed outside the walls. The hall was quiet, but in the end, it was Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, who broke the silence. Although the Arabs have come with a ferocious momentum, and the battlefield is closer to them, numbers are not the only things that matter in war. There is also overall strength, training, cooperation, strategy, tactics, logistics, and all other aspects. From these considerations, I believe that there is no need for everyone to worry too much. The urgent task at hand is to discuss how to deal with the alliance between the Uzan, Western Turks, and Arabs. My opinion is the same as Lord Father's. Abu Muslim has still not retreated. If we don't thoroughly defeat him, this war can't be considered over. Wang Chong's big brother, Wang Fu, also spoke up at this moment. Abu Muslim is not that easy to deal with. I've fought with him for more than 2 months, so I have some understanding of him. He likes to constantly test the waters, using high-intensity attacks to assault his opponents like a tide until his opponents will crumble, and he strikes fear into their hearts. And even if his opponent doesn't lose, he will gradually grasp your weakness through these constant attacks. In the end, he will personally strike and use his overwhelming advantage to deal a fatal blow to finish off his opponent. Gao Xianji suddenly interrupted. His expression was solemn, and there was a hint of warning in it. Moreover, the Arabs worship battle. No matter how many people they lose, as long as Abu Muslim does not give the order to retreat, they will never retreat, much less give up. To the Arabs, as long as they can defeat their opponents and conquer their country, they don't care about the price. In this aspect, they are completely different from the other opponents of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 1567. But, if the city of Talas's myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation is so formidable that not even the behemoth can break it, doesn't that make the Tang dynasty invincible? Huashuwazong couldn't help but frown. Haha, it's not that simple. Dalawan Ruozan shook his head and grinned. The myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation at Talas was built more than 200 years ago. 100 years ago, the formation was already rather unstable, and now that the world has changed, the formation is finding it very difficult to absorb enough energy from the earth. At this point, the formation is probably only at 40 or 50% of its original strength. It won't be able to hold out for too long. As long as the Arabs let that behemoth continue to attack, the pressure on the formation will reach its limit. That's when the walls will fall. Dalawan Ruozan's expression was calm and composed, but he exuded a powerful confidence that made others involuntarily trust him. After so many years on the battlefield and facing all sorts of powerful foes, Dalawan Ruozan had long ago developed an extraordinary intelligence and calculating ability. Although the Arab behemoth army was rather surprising, Dalawan Ruozan's abilities allowed him to quickly grasp the rhythm of the battle. It was very difficult for anything to surpass his expectations. Prime Minister, in your view, how long will that beast need to break the city of Talas? Duwasili's voice came from the side. If the Tang people can't find an effective method, It won't take more than 5 minutes to finish a cup of tea, Dalwin Ruozan confidently declared. In the distance, the black boar-like behemoth outside the walls of Talas was smashing, shoving and crashing. Only those who had actually seen it would understand why this behemoth was called the destroyer of cities. The speed and frequency of its attacks far surpassed anyone's imagination. In a single second, it had launched at least 5 or 6 attacks on the city. Dense rumbling sounds echoed throughout the city. Everyone in the city felt threatened, their fear reaching a peak. In this city, there was no way for them to escape. Every time the behemoth attacked, it was like a death knell to them. Kill it. Don't let him get close to the wall. Seeing the concentrated attacks, Gao Xinji, Cheng Qianli, Wang Yan and Banahan were all shocked. The city wouldn't be able to hold on for long if the beasts kept attacking like this. Boom, boom, boom. Countless attacks rained down on the black boar-like behemoth. Gao Xinji, Cheng Qianli, Wang Yan, and the other 30,000 great generals were also frantic, and all of them were doing their utmost. It's useless. The destroyer is different from other behemoths. Any type of attack is greatly reduced against it. What you're doing is futile. In the distance, Mazel inwardly sneered at the sight of the 3 great generals attacking the destroyer. When the destroyer was first created, it had taken into account the possibility that it would be obstructed by some supreme experts during its assault on the city, so its defense had been set to be very high. This was something that the first sower could not compare to. The attacks of Gao Xinji and the others would not be able to inflict any damage on the sower, even after the city was breached. Awa! Just when Mazel's lips curled into a cold smile, he heard a heaven-shaking howl. Mazel's heart trembled as he turned his head. In another direction, the terrorizer was charging. A massive 4-armed god, its body blazing with violet flames, had punched the terrorizer's head several times. The violet flames had latched onto Wang Chang's fists and spread to the terrorizer's body, seeping through the chinks in its armor. The terrorizer's defense was extremely powerful. The scales that covered its entire body were even more resistant to all kinds of attacks than the destroyer to a certain extent. Wang Chong had only needed a few punches to make the terrorizer howl. This was completely beyond Mazel's imagination. He could clearly sense that the terrorizer had been heavily injured and in excruciating pain. Those attacks had posed an enormous threat to it. This is impossible. This doesn't make sense. No one can inflict so much damage to the terrorizer. Mazel's eyes widened in shock, not daring to believe what he was seeing. What's going on here? Let alone Mazel, even Abu Muslim couldn't help but show a hint of shock. There was no need to doubt the behemoth's abilities, and he was sure that something had happened to it that he did not know about. Otherwise, a single great general of the Tang dynasty would never have been enough to make the terrorizer howl in pain. Li Sai, attack its joints with all your strength. In addition, everyone be careful of the behemoth's trampling. Wang Chang's furious roar echoed through the plains like a clap of thunder. The god King Yama that he had transformed into hugged the terrorizer's head tightly from the side. His 4 arms took turns to attack, and every punch was filled with his full strength. His conjecture from before had been confirmed. The strength of Lu Wu was apparently very effective against these behemoths. With each punch, Wang Chong could sense powerful life energy flowing from the behemoths into his body. Wang Chong's god King Yama originally only had the strength of a low-level great general, but with the support of the life energy of these behemoths, his cultivation was constantly rising, his strength madly rising from the low-level great general level to the middle-level great general level. Not only that, Wang Chong's own strength had also risen from Saint Martial Tier 7 to Saint Martial Tier 8, and he was charging toward Saint Martial Tier 9, the Brigadier General level. If Wang Chong could reach the Brigadier General level, he would undergo a qualitative transformation. Both he and the god King Yama would reach a higher level of power. Roar! Enraged by Wang Chong's attack, the scaled hippo behemoth roared and charged at Wang Chong. But although Wang Chong was still weaker than Gao Xinji and the others, his fighting skills were something that not even a supreme existence, like the celestial wolf great general Dewissely, could do anything to. let alone the others. Bang! Wang Chong flipped over, his enormous body flipping from one side of the scaled behemoth to the other. As he landed, he unleashed a torrent of fists at the behemoth. The violet flames grew brighter and brighter, and with each punch, the flame of life on the scaled behemoth's body dimmed a little. This sort of situation had never happened to the Arab behemoth army before. Just who is that bastard? Someone kill him for me. Mazel was enraged. Master archers? Where are the master archers? It's useless. The attacks of master archers have no effect on this sort of great general. Ziad looked into the distance, his expression incomparably solemn. Let alone Mazel. Not even Ziad had expected such a situation to occur. There had to be a reason why the behemoth army had become one of the cornerstones of the caliph. Not even Ziad, who had reached the great general level through the aid of his ritual tool, was confident that he could deal with a single behemoth. Not even Ziad could explain the situation before him. He could only say that this young great general definitely had something on him that could restrain the behemoth army. Perhaps it was that violet flame, or perhaps something else. This was not good news for the Arabs. Damn it! I don't care if the attacks of the master archers are useful, but that Tang people must die, whether it's for the empire or for this war. Mazel pointed a finger at Wang Chong, but his eyes were on Abu Muslim and Ziad, the two highest commanders of the Eastern Army. Mazel's duty was to attack the city, break the stalemate, and destroy the enemy army. As for the experts of the enemy army, they were undoubtedly Abu Muslim and Ziad. Mazel's meaning was crystal clear. The Eastern Sassanid army, especially Abu Muslim and Ziad, must be responsible for eliminating this threat. Relax. He won't survive. No matter what the result of this battle is, he won't be able to return to the East alive. Abu Muslim's eyes were filled with disdain as he spoke, his voice firm and unquestionable. In truth, not a single one of the Tang people you see will be able to leave. But before that, I need you to fulfill our agreement. Destroy the Tang people's defense line, and destroy their cities. Abu Muslim gave Mazel a profound stare as he spoke, his meaning clear as day. No matter how one looked at it, it was extremely unwise for Mazel's terrorizer to remain outside the defense line and tangle with an imperial great general of the Tang dynasty. It was also not in line with the Arabs' will. Abu Muslim needed to completely destroy the steel defense line of the Tang dynasty. Without this steel defense line, the outcome of the war would be completely different. The hundreds of thousands of Arab soldiers might have already crushed the enemy. Understood. Lord Governor, be at ease. I will definitely fulfill my promise. Even though Mazel had never cared about what others said, he couldn't help but blush and give a deep bow. Neither the terrorizer nor the destroyer had managed to destroy the enemy's cities and break their defense line. This was undoubtedly a disgrace to the behemoth army. Chapter 1568. Roar! Roar! The behemoth's roars echoed throughout the city of Talas as its massive body continued to press and advance on Wang Chong. Although Abu Muslim's arrow had missed, it was not completely ineffective. While Wang Chong was distracted, the scaled behemoth had seized the opportunity to charge forward. It was now less than 100 feet from the first defense line. Its breath blew against the steel walls with thunderous booms, and some of the closest Tang dynasty soldiers were unable to stop it and were sent flying along with their horses. The arms of Wang Chong's god King Yama wrapped around the neck of the terrorizer as he stubbornly resisted. Although Wang Chong was doing his best, he was finding it harder and harder to hold on. The power of the god King Yama's descent was not limitless. With each passing second, Wang Chong's strength would weaken a little. Wang Chong had been able to stop the scaled behemoth's advance at the start, but now, Wang Chong's entire body was being pushed forward. Damn it! Wang Chong bellowed, his metal cudgel slamming against the behemoth's head again and again. The violet flames of Lu Wu's strength wrapped around the cudgel and spread into the behemoth's body. With each passing second, the behemoth's vigorous flames of life would dim a little. Boundless vitality poured into Wang Chong's body, but it still could not stop the frenzied behemoth. Although Wang Chong had punched a hole in its skull, This was already its limit. An invisible energy seemed to be stopping Wang Chong, preventing him from advancing any further. Release! On the ground, Chen Bin's right hand swung down once more. From all directions, countless crossbow bolts pierced through the air and shot toward the behemoth in front of them. But this time, a considerable portion of the crossbow bolts bounced off the giant beast's hard scales. Only a small portion managed to penetrate the gaps between the scales. Wang Chong might have stalled the giant beast, but his enormous Yama devil body had also greatly affected the attacks of the ballistae on the ground. Again, Chen Bin's expression remained unchanged as he issued another order. This was the last attack they could launch. The behemoth could leap over at any time. With just one kick, the ballista army would suffer heavy losses. Zhang Shouji, are you done yet? Wang Chong's anxious voice resounded in the sky. In a place where no one could see, Wang Chong's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Fresh blood flowed from the web between his thumb and forefinger. Forcefully fighting against a giant beast that he couldn't defeat was a huge burden on his body. Crack! A massive crack spread from the God King Yama's shoulder to his back like a spider's web, all the way to his waist. And these fine cracks were increasing at an astonishing rate on the body of Wang Chong's four-armed God King Yama. In just a few moments, the God King Yama's body was covered in these fine cracks, making it look like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. This was a sign that the God King Yama had reached the limit of its endurance and was on the verge of collapse. On the ground, the atmosphere was tense and confrontational to the extreme. All the craftsmen were frantically assembling the ballistae, their faces pale and their scalps numb. Just a few more moments. Marquis, hold on. Zhang Shouji's anxious voice came from the ground, his beard fluttering in the wind. At this moment, no one knew just how much pressure he was under. Not enough time. Far from enough. Zhang Shouji could very quickly assemble the ballistae, but something like a giant ballista had never appeared in the history of the empire. None of the craftsmen, including Zhang Shouji himself, had any experience with it. This little bit of time simply wasn't enough. Bang! As soon as Zhang Shouji's voice fell, the gigantic scaled beast immediately pushed the gigantic Yama heavenly god forward. The God King Yama's massive heel kicked up a great deal of dirt and sand as it smashed into the steel walls behind it. With a heaven-shaking boom, 7 or 8 steel walls were uprooted and sent tumbling through the air like broken kites. Retreat! Hurry and retreat! Cries of alarm resounded through the sky. There was chaos in front of the huge beast as countless soldiers retreated in panic. In front of the behemoth, they were nothing more than ants, so weak that they couldn't even injure it, let alone resist. 7th square formation, 10th square formation, 23rd square formation. All of you retreat. A familiar voice resounded in everyone's ears. It was Wang Chong's. Even though he was in the middle of a fierce battle and had his back to them, Wang Chong was still able to grasp the situation on the battlefield. Even though he was in a perilous situation, his square formation did not fall into disarray. Boom! Upon receiving Wang Chong's order, the army in front of the behemoth began to scatter to the sides. Roar! At almost the same time, the scaled behemoth unleashed its ferocious nature. With a fling of its massive body kicked up a cloud of dust as it shot forward. "Aya!" Screams filled the air. The seemingly ordinary sand was instantly transformed into the most lethal weapons under the behemoth's terrifying strength. Nay! Amidst miserable neighs, warhorses that weren't able to dodge in time were struck by the sandstorm, instantly becoming badly mangled, and their bodies were covered in bloody holes that resembled honeycombs. As for the warrior on horseback, although he was wearing armor, he was still sent flying from the back of the horse and fell heavily. His internal organs were already injured in the air, and he stopped breathing. Even a sneeze from a giant elephant was a devastating blow to an ant. The same was true for the Tang Dynasty army in front of Talas. Manpower was far too insignificant in the face of these legendary behemoths. Damn it! In an instant Wang Chong's eyes reddened. With no time to think, Wang Chong thrust the 10-meter-long cudgel that had been used to deal with the behemoth into the earth behind the defense line. One end of the cudgel sank into the rock, while the other end pressed against the behemoth's body. In order to avoid heavy casualties, Wang Chong had no other choice. But even so, this was only temporary. The danger to the army was far from over. Kacha! At this moment there was a crisp sound. Under the shocked gazes of countless people, the huge God King Yama's arm was severed at the base. It fell heavily from the sky and landed on the ground, causing a cloud of dust to rise into the air. This was the second arm of the four-armed God King Yama that had been severed. In a place where no one could see, the moment the second arm fell, Wang Chong vomited a mouthful of blood. Marquis. On the ground, Chen Bin, Sun Jiming, Chen Burang, and Zhuang Jinping all paled at this sight. Even though his cultivation level was far from enough, they could all sense that Wang Chong's body was at its limit, and that he wouldn't be able to last much longer. But this was not the end. Rumble! The scaled behemoth, the terrorizer, suddenly slammed its head against the God King Yama, sending Wang Chong flying more than a dozen zhang away. Without Wang Chong's obstruction, an empty space of more than a dozen zhang appeared in front of the behemoth. The army was now completely exposed. Not good. Get out of the way. Retreat! Retreat! Army retreat! Get out of here. We can't hold on any longer. At this sight, the tens of thousands of Tang soldiers fell into chaos. Panic began to spread, and every one of them could sense the thick stench of death. The army, which had maintained its composure a moment ago, was instantly routed. No one could imagine the damage a behemoth could inflict on an army without anyone to stop it. Marquis, the giant ballistae are ready. Everyone get out of the way. Just as the army was about to suffer grievous losses, a loud shout came from the crowd. Without any warning, the several thousand craftsmen who had been gathered together suddenly scattered, retreating in every direction. In the center of the craftsmen, a massive and heavy ballista had already been assembled. This ballista was more than 10 meters long, and its body was pitch black. Many of its parts were still steaming. These were the parts that had just been forged and were immediately used on the giant ballista. After spending a great deal of time and energy and gathering the strength of the craftsmen, Zhang Shouji had finally completed this giant ballista. Owa! The behemoth roared. Just as the craftsman finished, the behemoth's muscles bulged and it squatted down, its massive head slowly lowering. Its scarlet eyes brimming with the desire to destroy glared at the army below. This was a sign that the behemoth was preparing to attack. Senior Zhang, give us the giant ballistae. The 7th, 10th, 12th, 14th square formation, everyone advance. The 30th, 38th square formation, load the ballistae. With no time to think, Chen Bin unsheathed his sword and rushed forward, issuing a series of orders. The army was in chaos, and everyone was fleeing. The craftsmen and Zhang Shouji were almost out of strength, and Wang Chong had been sent flying by the behemoth. At this time, besides Chen Bin and his ballista army, no one else could stop the behemoth. Bang! Chen Bin and the ballista army's training was on full display at this moment. As soon as Chen Bin's voice fell, the ballista soldiers, who had been preparing to retreat, changed directions and charged at the giant ballista. Several hundred ballista soldiers had a clear division of labor, and there was no chaos. Creak creak. Several dozen Tang Dynasty soldiers worked together to load a 10-meter-long ballista bolt, weighing nearly 1,000 jin, onto the giant ballista. Boom! A massive foot stomped down heavily, landing in the area within the defensive line. The massive power seeped into the ground through the sole of the foot, causing the ground within the defensive line to tremble. Hundreds of feet away, screams could be heard as hundreds of fleeing cavalrymen were thrown into the air along with their horses. The behemoth had finally broken through the defense line and launched its attack. The army of nearly 100,000 was in grave danger. Fire! Chen Bin finally gave the order to fire. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Everyone held their breath, and their hearts were in their throats. The giant ballista had always been an idea that had never been realized. Not even Zhang Shouji, the creator and executor of the plan, knew if the giant ballista would succeed or not, or if the bolts it fired would be able to harm the scaled behemoth, let alone anyone else. Chapter 1569. Bang! Like a dragon emerging from the sea, an earth-shattering boom rang out as a huge arrow broke the silence. It shot out like a bolt of lightning towards the scaled beast in the distance. This arrow carried the hopes of countless people. Even the fleeing mercenaries of the western regions couldn't help but turn their heads, their eyes shining with boundless hope. Several dozen zhang passed, 50 zhang, 30 zhang, 100 zhang. Time seemed to slow down countless times as the distance between the arrow and the scaled behemoth continued to shrink. 70 zhang, 60 zhang. Boom! As countless people watched, the arrow fired from the giant crossbow struck the scaled armored behemoth's head. Oa! The moment the longsword hit, the huge scaled beast seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Its two front hooves were lifted off the ground, and its huge head was thrown back as it let out a painful howl. And its life energy, which had already been rapidly weakened by Wang Chong, was now even more severely weakened. Boom! Cheers shook the heavens as the nearly 100,000 soldiers cheered in excitement. When so many people cheered together, no one could have imagined such a sight. Wonderful! It's working! The giant ballista really is effective against the behemoth. The morale of the entire army soared. Chen Bin and the ballista soldiers were also overjoyed. Success! The giant ballista that Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji had designed together was actually effective against the behemoth. The moment this giant ballista appeared, it immediately displayed an unimaginable power. This arrow had an unprecedented impact on the distant Uzan, the Western Turks, the Arabs and everyone else. What is that? When did the Tang dynasty get such a formidable weapon? On the hill, Huashu Wuzong's eyelids twitched violently. Looking at the arrow stuck in the giant beast's head, his heart was in turmoil. Huashu Wuzong was a renowned general of the Uzan Empire, and he had crossed swords with Zhangqiu Jinxiong many times, as well as other generals of the Tang dynasty. However, Huashu Wuzong had never seen such a weapon before. The fact that the Arabian Empire possessed a behemoth army was already surprising enough, but the fact that the Tang dynasty possessed such a terrifying weapon against the behemoths left Huashu Wuzong in shock and astonishment. Although the giant beasts were terrifying, if the Tang dynasty had a large number of these weapons, then even the giant beast army would have nothing to fear. In contrast, the Tang dynasty, which could create weapons to deal with the giant beasts, was more feared and feared. Impossible! When did the Tang dynasty become capable of resisting Arabia? The most shocked of all was the celestial wolf Great General Dewussili. He had been watching from the sidelines this entire time, and no activity had escaped his eyes and ears. When the behemoth had sent Wang Chong flying, Dewussili had believed that the outcome of the battle was already decided. What awaited the Tang dynasty was the complete annihilation of its army and the destruction of its city. He had never imagined that a single arrow from the Tang dynasty would be able to deal such a heavy blow to the behemoth. The originally clear ending suddenly became confusing because of this arrow. Bastard! What's going on here? No one was more shocked than the commander of the behemoth army, Mazel. The behemoths had no natural enemies, and their defenses were so powerful that no human weapon could injure them. Mazel found it hard to accept that one of the behemoths had died here. But what was even harder to accept was that these Eastern infidels were actually able to create weapons that could deal with the behemoths. This time, Abu Muslim and Ziyad, the two highest commanders of the East, did not immediately rebuke Mazel. Even for the two commanders, the arrow that had appeared out of the blue had caused a great impact and shock. Quickly reload. Prepare for the second shot. Chen Bin's voice resounded through the sky in high spirits. Although it had failed to kill the behemoth, the giant ballistae had already proven their value. They were completely capable of dealing a heavy blow to the Arabian behemoth. Owa! Just when the 20-some ballista soldiers were about to load another giant bolt, a roar rang out. At some point, a pair of scarlet eyes had locked onto the ballista soldiers, a look of extreme hatred in them. At almost the same time, a thick baleful aura surged over the ballista soldiers and engulfed them. In an instant, everyone felt a terrifying sense of danger. Not good. The behemoth is aiming at us. Hurry! Reload the ballistae. Everyone prepare to protect the ballistae. Although that arrow had heavily wounded the scaled behemoth, it had also succeeded in enraging it. With a heaven-shaking roar, the behemoth turned its head and charged at the behemoths. The army was in a state of panic, and even Chunbin paled. Just as the giant ballistae and the surrounding ballista soldiers were about to fall to the behemoth's hands, everyone heard a massive roar in their ears. "Get out of my way!" With a flash of light, a huge figure pushed the behemoth out of the defensive line like a mountain of gold and jade. "Milord, Marquis." The sight of that familiar figure gave the behemoths a boost in morale. Although Wang Chong's four-armed god had lost 2 arms, it still possessed immense strength. More importantly, the behemoth had suffered one blow after another, and its flame of life was rapidly dimming. It was no longer as ferocious as before. Thud thud thud. Caught off guard, the behemoth lost its balance and was pushed back several steps by Wang Chong's god King Yama, each step causing the earth to quake and all of Talas to quake. "Beast, eat another blow from my cudgel." Wang Chong's furious roar was like a peal of thunder. He swung his cudgel at the behemoth's head, or to put it more accurately, at the giant ballista bolt sticking out of the behemoth's head. The behemoth howled, its body trembling in pain. Half of the ballista bolt had been exposed, but now that Wang Chong had smashed it into the behemoth was once more heavily wounded. And Wang Chong's attacks were far from over. With this wave of attacks, the behemoth's mind was thrown into disarray, and Wang Chong's god King Yama continued to rain down blows. Boom boom boom. In a few short moments, the behemoth's head had suffered 30 to 40 blows. "Wonderful! Marquis! Marquis! Marquis!" Cheers soared into the heavens, and the distant Uzan, Western Turks and Arabs all grimaced. "Release!" With Wang Chong fending off the behemoth, Chun Bin and the others became excited. Chun Bin swung down his Wuxia steel sword, and in a flash of light, a second ballista bolt flew through the air, piercing into the behemoth's head. "Faster, faster!" Chun Bin continued to urge them. With the experience from the first time, the speed at which everyone reloaded was much faster this time. Boom! Immediately after the second huge crossbow, another arrow over 10 meters long struck the giant beast's head with a deafening roar. Wang Chong and the giant ballistae worked closely together. Wang Chong used his cudgel to attack while the giant ballistae fired from the rear. One ballista bolt after another struck the behemoth's head, and with each strike, the behemoth's life energy dimmed a little. Boom! The last volley did not come from Chun Bin and the others, but from the open gate of Talas. At some point, a second giant ballista had been assembled within the city, and had been pushed out of the gate. The commander at the lead was tall and extremely young. It was none other than Suki. The appearance of the 2 giant ballistae elicited a wave of cheers from the army, and the morale, which had been at rock bottom, instantly soared, even surpassing what it had been before the battle. And when Suki's arrow shot out, the distant behemoth toppled over like a pillar of jade. The fall of the behemoth caused the earth to tremble, as if it was unable to endure the enormous force, and was on the verge of splitting apart. After enduring 20-some giant ballista bolts, the terrorizer of the Arabian Empire's illustrious body finally lost all of its vitality. "Protector General! Protector General! Protector General!" Both inside and outside the defense line, including Talas, the cheers of the army could be heard from 100 li away. In the distance, the soldiers of the 3 empires had nasty grimaces, especially the Arabs. The terrorizer's reputation was like a thunderclap in their ears, and it had destroyed countless cities. No existence had ever been able to pose a true threat to this behemoth, much less kill it. But now it had slumbered here. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have never dared to believe it. This was undoubtedly an enormous blow to the Arab army. Buzz! Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong raised his right foot and strode over the corpse of the terrorizer. "Chun Bin, Suki, I'll leave those 2 giant ballistae to you. Work together and finish off the last behemoth." Wang Chong's voice was still echoing over the defense line, but he had already vanished into the distance. In the distance, Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, and Wang Yan were engaged in a white-hot battle with the black boar behemoth. The three of them were madly attacking the behemoth, but the behemoth ignored them and continued to attack the city of Talas. The majestic city of Talas was constantly trembling, and the trembling was only getting stronger and stronger. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.